Okay, I'm recording. Okay. So, greetings from LA, my dear friends. Or should I say, ooh, baby, ooh, baby. I hope you didn't eat your enchiladas today.
Oh
Okay.
no, man, I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Okay.
Yeah, everything's stable, everything's fine.
Okay. I'm glad everything is stable. That's good. Stability is always welcome.
Yeah, man.
So, so anyway, greetings, and as you can see, my dear friends, we are joined once again by Tanner
Thank you
from
so
the
much for
Horrible
having me
Show.
on,
What's
man.
up,
I
Tanner?
always
How's
appreciate
everything?
everything's great, man. Everything's great. I hope everything is great with you. Everything's great with you all out there too.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. And I must apologize up front. I think I'm having issues with my Wi-Fi again, so I apologize. So I
Oh,
think
it's okay. I
I
think
am
mine's not the best either.
lacking in stability. No, it's
It's
okay,
okay,
not a
man.
problem. So it's all good.
It's relative.
So what's going on? How are you doing, Tanner? How are you doing,
I'm doing
Tanner?
great. I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I've had a lot of fun going over all these Friday the 13th movies. Let me tell you, it's kind of like a blast
That's
from the
right. That's
past.
right.
Yeah, I feel like I've been anywhere from 13 to 17-year-old kid again here in the past couple days.
Yes, I think Friday the 13th is around the corner, and I must say, yes, it's been fun to explore or revisit the Friday the 13th film. So it's that time of year, or it's that one of
Hmm.
those times of years where I have invited our dear friend Tanner once again to lend us his expertise with regard to the Friday the 13th films. And so I'd like to propose to share with each other our favorites list of the Friday the 13th films, including the remake and including Freddy vs. Jason. So that gives
Yep.
us 12 films, and we're going to rank them in order of our favorites list from number
Hmm.
12 all the way down to number 1. So we did this before with the Halloween films, and then we did it with the Nightmare on Elm Street films. And I think Freddy is creeping, his eyes are peeping above the
Yeah.
line there, I see. Yeah,
Oh
so
yeah. I
he's
wear it's
hoping
my
he's
good
hoping
luck
that
shirt.
Freddy versus he's saying you better have Freddy versus Jason high up there. That's what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
So
I do have a an Alice Cooper and a Jason T-shirt, like from Part Six, but it seems like my eating habits have not been stable. So
oh my goodness, yes. So
yeah, yeah. So that shirt is in the closet for another day.
okay, understood. So we'll have to go for another video collaboration round in order to enjoy that. So that is yes to be continued. So I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
that, my dear friend. But so here's how it works. So let us share our list from number 12 all the way to number 1. We'll start with we'll leave our top three at the end. So let's go from number 12 to number 4, I think. So Tanner, you can go first, and I'll follow you, and then we can just exchange our comments that like that. This is let's agree up front. We're gonna probably talk about details and spoilers. So
Yeah.
my dear friends, if you haven't seen, yeah, it's everything's fair game. It's on the table, but I don't, we'll try to maintain a certain degree of cinema discussion stability as we
Yeah.
speak. But just to let you know, we will be talking about the films, the Friday the 13th films, and yeah, and these are our opinions, and so this is just meant to we're having a good time, we're having fun with films that we love very much, which are the Friday
Yeah.
the 13th films. So I guess on that note, before we get started, Tanner, could you let us know quickly what was your entry point into the world of Friday the 13th?
So really, I don't know. Do you know how movies just kind of appear at your house when you're growing up? So for some reason, I had a VHS copy of the first movie just around, and I think like I want to say it was actually one of the uncut. There's and people, especially in the comments, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I think there was a couple of batches of those VHS that came out that were uncut because I remember watching the original later on and just be like, man, I thought that headshot was a little bit, a little bit trimmed up. Um, But yeah, just that original VHS, and of course, like around the Halloween, you tape whatever you can off a TV, and I think I got most of them that way until I don't know if you remember at all. There was you a thing they had it with CDs too. You could like pay 99 cents, and they would send you like a monthly. Dude, I got all the Friday the 13th movie, like the original Paramount DVDs, and man, I just blew through them like that. And it was a cool time, man. It's a cool time to be the classic DVD collector.
So you saw the first one first.
First one first.
Oh, good. And then what was your progression through the series? Was it in order, or was it kind of a different order that you watched the films?
So it was in order, but it's weird because I think some people have the same experience. Like you'll hear, especially when it comes to like let's say Halloween 3 or Friday Part 5, you'll hear so much flack about it that you end up just kind of skipping it, which I thought was a huge mistake in hindsight. Because of course in Halloween Part 3, there's no Michael Myers, and in Friday the 13th Part 5, there's no Jason Voorhees, or he not the one doing the killings. So I watched all except for Part 5 and watched that later.
Oh, great. That's yeah. So, and I suppose we will talk in more detail about which is your favorites, obviously going forward. So,
Hmm.
I'm looking forward to that very much. Just a quick note from me. I saw the films again. I grew up in the '80s, and so this was the VHS days, and the early to mid '80s. So this was around the time that three, four, and five were pretty much in circulation,
Hmm.
making the rounds in terms of the video rentals when I could. In particular, three and those are the big ones for me.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I think I watched them out of order, so it was very difficult. Well, I mean, it was an interesting way to traverse the terrain of Friday the 13th as I was growing up. But of course, as I grew up, of course, Six came along, and Fangoria magazine was huge in order
Yeah.
to fuel my interest even further. I mean, I remember still the Fangoria magazine covers, and there's a huge cover of Part 7 Jason, unmasked Part 7 Jason on one of the covers, if I recall correctly. And then my
Yeah.
excitement grew even further when I heard about they were going to release Friday the 13th Part 8. Jason goes to Manhattan, what is it? Goes to
Hmm.
Manhattan, which is not
Yeah.
really Manhattan,
Yeah.
and see, he. So it's like he doesn't he goes to not quite Manhattan,
Yeah.
and Jason goes to Hell, which is the final Friday, which is really intriguing, and we'll get to that obviously when we'll get
Yeah.
to that. But it was yeah, they were all in circulation, kind of more or less,
Hmm.
and they were always in the air when I was growing up because I was a huge and I still am a huge horror film fan, based upon, as I say, my experiences with the local VHS rental store back in the day, and so Friday the 13th was a huge part of that. So, but with that, my dear friends, let's just go right into it. So I'd like you to
Okay.
start with your number 12, and then you can just go along, and I'll try to join in your conversation. But let's start with your number 12, and then let's go all the way 12, 11, 10, up to your number 4. So what's your number 12 favorite Friday the 13th
All,
film?
all right. And so this is my number 12. And again, I've got some notes on here, and I am sorry, especially people in the comments, if I'm being long-winded on this, but I've actually gone on record saying that this is my least favorite of kind of like even the big 3 or 4 franchise horror films. But this past watch, even though this is my number 12 pick, I'm not hating on it as much as I used to. I think this watch was actually a very good one for me here lately. So the plot of Jason Goes to Hell, you got Jason and he can kind of switch bodies, right? And he's got to end up in either a Voorhees or in another person. But if he wants to stay alive or be reborn, he's got to be in a Voorhees, right? And there's different. If you ask yourself, so this is 1993, where was horror then? So you got Leprechaun, Army of Darkness, Ticks, Brain Dead, Returning the Living Dead, and Trauma. So it's kind of like we were in this weird like people were thinking thrillers were a little bit the thrillers of the early 90s were a little bit better than kind of I would say a lot of the horror movies. You have like Misery and Silence of the Lambs. But I think this movie has a cool energy, and there's about 30 minutes right before the end of the movie that are great. It almost feels like a Terminator movie because it's two people on the run. So you'll have different points where Jason will switch bodies and he kind of stays in a body, and you kind of get familiar to his kind of like pattern, and the main character and his baby mama, to lack of a better term, um, they're on the run. There's this big shootout in a diner that's pretty cool, and you get a lot of kills. And I will say, there's one of the most underrated kills in this movie. Somebody gets their head in a deep fryer, and it's absolutely hilarious. So, if you're a horror fan, I think you should watch this one, just even for that, because I think
Yeah.
it's worth the price of admission.
What did you think of the what is it, the Creighton Duke? Is that his name? The that whole storyline, like the bounty hunter type of character. Yeah.
I feel like there's a I don't know if it's just me, but there's a kind of like a trait to a lot of these the Gen X directors where they take over for a horror movie franchise, that they throw the little things that they love in it too. So you can tell that like maybe the bounty hunter was kind of like a really soft spot for the writer and the director, like just
Mm.
kind of how like comic books were in Part Five of Nightmare on Elm Street. Uh, so I think the character was pretty funny, and I think he was definitely I think he kind of kept the momentum going too, especially when he's like breaking his fingers and stuff like that. I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And it kind of was. It kind of reminded me of the bounty hunter type of characters you have in like Jaws. You know, the Quint
Hmm.
character in Jaws, and then also like Steven other Stevens like Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park Two, the Lost
Hmm.
World. You had those, and even down to the hat and everything. And
Yeah.
I almost wish it could have been, I don't know, like Tommy. You know, maybe it could have been a Tommy character being
Hmm.
the ultimate. I don't know, Jason bounty hunter. You
Yeah.
know, he's
I,
hunting Jasons, and he's hunting like different Jasons around. You know, but oh well, oh well.
yeah. I know, but that's a good point. But because when I was watching a couple things this morning. So I guess the director, so when New Line
Yeah,
purchased the rights, yeah, because it was supposed to be the main character was supposed to be Tommy, right?
yeah,
And I
yeah.
thought, and dude, I didn't know that until a couple days ago, and it was blowing my mind. I was like, that would have made so much more sense. Um, so it's one of when you think about it, is it the spirit of a movie enough to kind of keep you going, even if the spirit of the movie and the filmmakers are better than the movie itself? Like, are the intentions does that make a movie better, or is it just stand on its own merits like that? Because there's a lot of cool, like it was insinuated that Pamela Voorhees brought him back with the Book of the Dead too, and that's
Yeah,
craziness, man.
yeah.
Um, but
It's yeah.
still, no. So after you,
No, please go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say like so even taking this movie face value, I think there's a lot of cool special effects. Um, I don't necessarily. When I was younger, I used to really like the way Jason looked in this film. Growing up, I don't know if it's really hit me like it did before. Somebody said once that it kind of looks like his head just looks like bubble gum swallowing the
Yeah,
mask, and I can't unsee that now.
yeah, yeah. Or it's like if you're putting if you're trying to heat up pasta in the microwave and you overheat it, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you just catch it before it explodes. It's that like kind of
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, but anyway, so that's your number 12. Jason Goes to Hell, the
That's
final
number 12.
Friday. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's continue. So what's your number 11, please?
So let's see here. All right. So I've got Jason
Okay.
X. And again, I think I will say all of these movies, they are worth your time. I really think like um Plot of this one is Jason gets frozen, and then they thaw him out 450 years later. You know, pretty like the plots to these movies are so bare bones, but it's really all that you need. You can. It's almost so a lot of the Friday the 13th movies, they're in a kind of like quiet location. Crystal Lake isn't a huge area, right? You know,
Yeah,
so you can take that whole setting, put it on a spaceship, and it really does. The do the beats of the movie work any less? No, I think it works. You know, plus they're adding some crazy sci-fi elements in there too. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and it had been. I remember seeing this in the movie theater. It had been so long. I felt like since uh, I keep on wanting to say Freddy's dead. Jason Goes to Hell. That I was in the mood for taking anything Jason. It didn't matter at all. Um, but it was nice. I got to see this one with my middle brother in the movie theater. I don't know how we even got in. I think my mom took us and then just left afterwards and then picked us up later. You know, uh, and Kane Hodder is really he's a main selling point for me every time that he plays
yeah.
Jason, and I
That's
think
right.
he really just he's one of the best. He's one of the best to ever portray him, and I get a
Yeah,
lot of nostalgia from Uber Jason too. And see, I don't love the overall look of Jason in this one. They went
mm,
before uh, he gets his head exploded, you know.
yeah.
But I've really I think I'm in the maybe the minority here for Uber Jason, but I think it's just a cool look, man.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it has a. I mean, it's certainly unique in terms of the look, and it's we're
yeah,
already in a. I mean, I guess we've already entered into the world of somewhat parody.
yeah,
You know, when the whole when he's got his own little holodeck, and going back to the sort of the holographic world of the campsite towards the
yeah,
latter the final part,
hmm
and sort of robots and androids and the what is it the I forget the what is it the frozen head
yeah.
and David Cronenberg. I mean, this is probably
I
the
know,
best
yeah,
David Cronenberg Friday the 13th film ever.
yeah.
So I mean, it's an interesting. I mean, I wish they could have had more directors come into the Friday the 13th films.
I know, yeah,
You know, but like you know, maybe John Carpenter's there or something, or Martin Scorsese's there, like saying, you know, okay, I'm gonna have just kind of, you know. So, but we had yeah David Cronenberg. Oh, you know, well,
yeah,
yeah, we have the the giant serial killer named Jason Voorhees here, and I'm gonna stand in the room. Nothing bad's gonna happen to me.
yeah,
But
and
I
just
think the yeah, and
cool,
he just yeah, just awesome,
you know.
fantastic. But anyway,
And
yes,
it's
Jason X. Yeah, oh, please go ahead, my friend.
no, and I was, and it just goes to show with David Cronenberg too that, like, I don't even know at the time. So I was probably like maybe early teenager that the people of his era, like the Cronenberg era, were so popular as being directors. Like I remember I was like, oh, that's David Cronenberg, not even seeing one of his movies yet. So that
Mm.
goes to show just like the weight of just seeing him on screen. I'm like, oh, this checks out now. You know, we got some real like horror iconography here. You know,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah,
And it's nice to see that kind of mutual respect
yeah,
around. So it's really great. But Jason X. Okay, that's your number 11.
yeah.
So let us continue on. So what's your number 10, my dear friend?
All right, so we got
Okay.
Friday the 13th, the remake from 2009. And this one was kind of a tough for me, really, because these bottom three really were kind of interchangeable for me. And nothing to discredit any of, any of the directors, anything like that. Um, but I will say again that I've probably had the most fun watching these now that I've probably ever had. Um, So this is kind of like your Cliff Notes version of the Friday the 13th franchise in one film, I will say. And the positives I gotta say for this remake is if you're looking at it not from a diehard fan's perspective, because I know some people that be like, "Hey, do you want to watch a movie from 43 years ago?" They're like, "No," and I truly I can understand that, you know. And if you give them this, they'll get kind of the gist of it. I think it does a really good job, at least telling the story of everything. If this is the only Friday the 13th movie that you can get somebody to watch, I don't think it'll be a waste of their time. Yeah. And really, you got out of all these remakes, I will say, except for maybe the Texas Chainsaw, I think it's really authentic to the series. I think it
Mm.
really does a lot of it right. You got the sleazy teenagers, you got a lot of nudity, you got the blood, kind of what people wanted out of the 80s when it comes to slasher movies. I know me, um, because a lot of growing up, you would kind of filter through a lot of these 80s slasher movies. Some of them can be like, you're 55 minutes in, there hasn't been a kill yet. And this movie almost can't beat the first 24 minutes of it. It starts off so strong that yeah, that you think you're like, how can they keep it going for this runtime? And sometimes it really doesn't. But I think even for the first 24 minutes, even if you turn it off, that's your money right there. It's great.
Yeah, it was around the time of all the remakes, that era. I mean,
Hmm.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Nightmare on Elm Street, which we spoke about before, even
Yeah,
around the time of Halloween, and so it was part of that. So it was par for the course. But as you say, I think it did a really good job in reiterating the history of the first two in particular,
yeah,
while forging its own path. I think it's a very strong film in terms of the remakes. I think that's for sure.
yeah.
I
So
agree.
even so that year, the My Bloody Valentine remake and the Last
That's right.
House on the Left remake came
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
So it's like you already had like three or four of them that year. And I will say, arguably, that was a pretty good year. Like the Last House and the My Bloody Valentine. Like I wouldn't get mad if somebody put those on. So I've seen worse horror movies than that.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
But
but I find myself recommending that, and I'll probably recommend now after rewatching it. I'll probably recommend it more to people.
and that's gonna. By the way, as of the time of this recording, that what is that? Is that coming out on Arrow? Is that right? Or
I think it's either I've seen some videos of people either unboxing it. I think it
okay,
officially comes out next week.
okay,
But I've heard great things too. I heard the transfer is really good on it.
okay. Very nice, very nice. Are you gonna
Yeah.
get that?
To tell you, I don't know. Did you get a chance? Did you rewatch this one? I know some of
Yes.
them. Yeah. The DVD leaves or the Blu-ray leaves a little to be desired
Yeah.
on there because I
Yeah.
was looking. I was like, man, this Blu-ray doesn't look great. you
Yeah.
know.
So you're probably gonna get it, or at least considering it.
Yeah, maybe I'll maybe wait for a sale. That's probably gonna
Very
be.
nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. But that's okay. So that very nice, very nice. We'll talk about it, of course, some more later. I think in terms of but the remix. That's your number 10. So far you have number 12. Please remind us. So number 12 is Jason Goes to Hell: The
Jason Goes
Final
to Hell.
Friday, and
Yep.
then
And
your
then we
number
got
11 is
Jason X.
and number 10.
Yeah. And then we got the Friday the 13th remake.
Great. Now let's go to number 9, please. Tanner's number 9 favorite.
Here, so this might be a little controversial, but this is really where I start to get. I really wanted to look at these with a fresh eyes and not have it nostalgia based, but I couldn't. I had to do the New
Okay.
Blood here, and I feel a little bittersweet about this one because there's so many good things that I think maybe one day we'll get an unrated cut of this movie. Um, and if you haven't watched this one out there, it's pretty much quote unquote Carrie versus Jason, right? You got a teenager with some telepathy going on, or a telekinesis. They can move stuff, and it's cool to watch Friday the 13th where Jason has kind of met his match a little bit, right? Especially one of my kind of gripes is so the first five or so Friday movies you got, I would consider it's living Jason, and then part six you got zombie Jason, right? Kind of part six, and then it kind of bookends. Then you get the remake, right? And they've almost made zombie Jason so unkillable that it's you sometimes you'll see you like people are getting punched through the chest and you're like how are you supposed to take this dude on, so it's nice to see a equal fight. And uh and the action scenes are really cool. Um I like when Jason gets his mask ripped off, everything about it. I think was it Carl Beekler that directed this one, right? I think having somebody that was so good at special effects directing the movie, it's so bittersweet because all the parts that you see are great, and then all the parts that you're supposed to see, it just kills you.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. I like the, what is it, the dad? The,
Yeah,
yeah, at the end he comes back and he's like, yeah, I like
yeah,
how he
yeah,
looks. He looks like a like he just he looks like a dad. He doesn't look like he's
yeah,
been like, yeah, it was
yeah.
great. I want to see more of the dad fight Jason. That would be really
Yeah,
cool. But, yeah.
yeah. He just has
Yeah.
that dad strength, dude.
Yeah, he has that wonderful dad vibe. Yeah, so
Yeah,
um, and I like the music. They went for the just the dun 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 dun. I like
yeah,
that percussion based
yeah,
opening theme. But you're right. Yeah, it always leaves you wondering what would it have been had we
yeah,
seen it sort of fleshed out in a way in terms of scenes. Yeah, I agree. A lot of the Friday the 13th films are like that, but this one in
yeah.
particular, I think, has that aura to it. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess it's depends on who's how you feel about that sort of thing. But I
True, very
understand. I
true.
can understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. Because really, if you, it seems like they would remove the gore and then maybe add some nudity to kind of balance it out. But if you take away the nudity from this movie, I think you get a PG-13, honestly, especially today, because it's pretty tame by today's standards. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's still very watchable, especially the iconic when the axe through the head
Yeah.
is, they used it for the Nintendo cover, the Friday the 13th game for Nintendo. So it's you see it on T-shirts. It's just an iconic, you know, probably arguably the best that Jason looked ever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think I know I'm not delving much into the plots of these, but it's really just like, other than, the main character having this telekinesis, it's kind of just kids moving in on somebody like a Jaws that's not in the water, Jaws, people are in his territory, he's going to take them out.
Yeah. This is it, and this is the place where it had to turn into
Yeah.
because of what happened with the previous film, Part Six. So it had to turn
Hmm.
into different territory. So now we're beginning to see different ways in which the films are going to be changing from how they were arguably in the first five or six films. So now you have
Hmm.
telekinesis, and then you'll have the next film going into a different world of
Yeah.
New York, and then going back to sort of the origins, kind of with Jason Goes to Hell, but it's not real. It's sort of a revisitation of the mythology, which is
Yeah.
something new, and then going into space with the next one. So this is
Yeah.
the arguably this is where the series goes into these new variations on the theme.
Yeah.
And I think for some people, I think that's probably in an interesting way. That's probably where it couldn't have gone any other way in order to have had this kind of longevity. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's a very strong thing. Although, right, it does feel, as you mentioned, it does feel. I think of the films, I think it maybe much like Jason X. To me, anyway, it feels closest. Jason X and the New Blood to me feel the closest to like an action adventure horror film.
Yeah.
In that you've got these the the heroes really putting on a good show in terms of being like action adventure movie heroes in a film like that. Not to say that the
Yeah.
other films aren't like that, but I think those two films in particular, New Blood or Part Seven, feel
Yeah.
very close to that. So,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
I love just the random, yeah, just the fight scenes I think are very creative and inventive as they should be. We've got this interesting setup, but and I like how Kane Hodder
Hmm.
and the performance, as you say, as you mentioned in your previous discussion. There's just a way in which he just shows like he's breathing and he just shrugs and goes down. I just
Yeah.
love his breathing, and he just
Yep.
his chest is pouting in that way. It's really great. That performance is wonderful. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, but yeah. What could have been, as you said, but for part seven. Okay, so this is your number nine film,
Yep.
part seven, The New Blood. So let's continue. What's your number eight favorite Friday
I
the
don't
Thirteenth film?
think I don't think I'm gonna trick anybody saying that this is gonna be my next one. And Jason Takes Vancouver. you know, um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or
but I
Jason
will
takes a
say,
boat, takes a boat, and then takes
take
Vancouver.
is
Yeah,
on a boat
yeah.
for
Or
the
or
notorious.
ship, I should say. Yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah.
ship.
Okay.
But how does a giant ship get to Crystal Lake? Who knows? You know. So this is really the plot on this one too is pretty loose. For I think eventually they stumble upon that. We have our main character that when she was a kid, she fell off a boat into Crystal Lake, and then he didn't like kill her. So now he's just, I guess he's got a vendetta against her now, and that gives him enough to go and get on a boat and follow her to all corners of Manhattan, you know. And there's a there's a lot of cool things that I like about this, like especially when it comes to nostalgia. The advertising for this movie was super cool, man. I think uh, the even the cover, the VHS cover and the regular cover, like you can't like whoever was in charge of that at Paramount knew exactly what they were going to do because they know it's going to be like this is going to be the best poster that people see this year. It's really going to get butts into the seats. Just like if I'm going to harken back to Jason Goes to Hell, like how many tickets do you think just word of mouth from the end scene with Freddy grabbing his mask, just word of mouth sold tickets for that? Like the
Yeah.
the the word of mouth posters, advertising like that. That's what got it, especially in the later sequels. Um, but I love the amount of toxic waste
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah. That's right.
that's in
That's
New
right.
York.
Yeah,
Like I never knew.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you got you got the Toxic Avenger in Jersey. But I guess you just have toxic waste and Jason in New York now. And I think a lot of the kills are pretty cool. I really like the guitar kill. I think it's pretty of the time, pretty rock and roll. But there's some almost weird metaphysical things that they do with Jason in this one too. They kind of have him like teleporting really quick, like some things that they didn't do in the last movie, but they're like, hey, maybe this can build up something cool, maybe even for a sequel after this. They didn't end up using that, but um, there's a lot of throw everything at the kitchen sink in between the slasher killings.
Sure. And also, child Jason kind of looks one way and looks another way. Yeah. So it's but
Yeah,
they try to introduce the child Jason mythology a
yeah,
little bit,
yeah,
which I can.
especially at the end. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So that has a, I think that has an attempt to try to link it to to the past, as it were, especially right.
Hmm.
Obviously from part one onwards. But
Yeah.
and Jason is a really strong swimmer, as we find out here.
I know.
Uh, uh,
It's so weird, and I know we were talking about this offline, but the from movie to movie, the mythology, don't trust any of it. Just
oh
go
yeah,
in
yeah,
there, get your
yeah,
popcorn, just take it for what it is. at face value.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I think you know, right. There should be a Jason where there's no water. It should be like on a dry land. Oh, am I off again?
No, no,
Oh,
no, you're
I'm
good.
out. Am I
Are you
okay?
out?
So there should be
Okay.
okay. Here we go. Okay, so it should be like a Jason film where there's no water, so he's on dry land, like he's on the planet Dune or something where there's no
Yeah.
water. So he should be see. Let's see how Jason tries to figure things without any water because they're always surrounded by water. He's either scared of it or it helps him. I don't know.
Yeah.
Here, water is kind of doing both things. He kind of helps him and then kind of betrays him at the end. Kind of. I don't know,
Yeah.
but
And then
it's,
of course at the end where so you got the main character and the love interest, they're down in the sewers, right? And
yeah.
then there's the guy that's working, he was like, well, there's gonna be like like 1,000 gallons of toxic waste here at midnight. So yeah, like it's just hilarious. Really is.
Perfect timing. Perfect
Yeah.
timing, by the way. Yes. So he couldn't have timed it better. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But anyway, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so this is so okay. So that means number nine. So let's see. Number 12 is just going back here. Number 12 is
Hmm.
Jason Goes to Hell the Final Friday. Number 11 is Jason X,
Jason X, yep.
and number 10 is the remake. Number
Hmm.
9 is part 7. And number 8 is part 8. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's continue on. So what's your number 7 favorite Friday the 13th film? Number 7.
Well, here we got a little bit of a change
Ah,
up here. We got old Freddy Krueger in there too.
okay.
Um, so I know we spoke about this before in our Nightmare on Elm Street rankings, but this movie, it's really got a soft spot in my heart. I think it does so many good things, and as an audience member, you can't, it's called Freddy versus Jason. You know exactly what you're gonna get out of there.
Mhm.
Like if you keep especially if you're a new viewer, keep your expectations low. Especially if you like action, like um, I'm not trying to disgrace John Woo's name in this, but if you like a more like 90s, maybe late 90s action kind of romp, I think it's a great uh, studio horror action movie. I think there's a lot of great kills. I think Robert Englund is done some of his best Freddy work in this. Um, I'm a little sad that Kane Hodder, there's a little bit of drama. No one that I guess it's kind of older now. But it's a shame he didn't get to play the role. But I think was it Ken Kersner? Kisner? I'm terrible with names, but I think he did a great job too, man. He's kind of like quiet and lumbering and lurking. But I remember,
Yeah.
did you have the Infinifilm DVD from New Line?
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
because I used to love, especially if we're bringing up
With
Jason X
with the
too.
silver kind of thing across
Yeah,
the yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because it really made me think of like the heyday of DVD.
Yeah.
It really it kind of made me feel old watching these. Like because when I don't know about you, when we first started watching them, people were like, "Oh yeah, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when these movies came out." Now it's like, "Oh God." It's gonna be like Tanner lives in the next sequel, dude, because I'm old.
No, not at all, not at all, not at all. But this was great because I loved how it made Jason into kind of a good guy. You're really rooting
Yeah,
for. At least I was. I was rooting for Jason, and because they made
yeah,
Freddy that diabolical and that
yeah.
manipulative, and Jason was sort of the victim of his manipulation, which I really enjoyed. Although he was wreaking havoc as he does, so I liked that kind of
Hmm.
switch up. Which it kind of leads you into the direction of what is this really Freddy versus Jason, or is it bad guy Freddy and Jason is another one of his victims, but he maybe turns the tables, or he might when the film goes into different directions. But I do like that. I do like the way it's done in the dream world and the real world.
Yeah,
And you got to be careful because you look one direction, there's Freddy. You look behind you, there's Jason. And I like
yeah,
that kind of switch up, and
yeah.
I think it handled it really well. It felt nice too because it felt like it balanced the two of them really nicely. I mean, I think it was
Yeah.
Freddy heavy, but I
Hmm.
think it still felt reasonably well balanced between the two of
Yeah.
them. Um,
Yeah.
so and it got into a little bit of the background and the mother, and then some of the psychology of Jason and
Hmm.
how Jason is afraid of water,
Yeah.
which if you think about it doesn't really make sense if he's a good swimmer in part 8.
Yeah.
If he's a good swimmer, he really shouldn't be. He should be scared of swimming, but he swims really strongly.
Yeah.
Um, but that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. But
And I will say, really, like when it comes to, I think this movie does a lot of fan service too. I want to say
yeah,
that's the only, because I tried to write down some notes. I'm like, oh, what's the good, what's the bad, and what's the ugly? Like Jason being a bad swimmer is like the only thing I could think for that ugly category because it does so much right that, you know, with the Friday the 13th series, they were looking for that extra little plot point, and then Freddy can just swoop in and just take up whatever it needs. So I thought it was pretty well done.
yeah. And I do
Yeah.
like its effects too. I like how the brawl, the final brawl, it wasn't one of these things. It wasn't like a magical defeat of Jason like we
Yeah.
had kind of with part. Was it Jason Goes to Hell, and like
Hmm.
those things that look like the plant creatures from Harry Potter. They kind of
I know.
grab
Yeah.
him and yeah, but it was actually just a no holds barred, just a bloody fight.
Yeah. A real
It felt
fight.
like
You know.
yeah, and they're just beating, they're just going at it, and you could feel the cuts and it's the pain and everything. So
Yeah.
it felt like there was a lot of oozing blood and guts with all the those battle scars in the scene, which is I like that. I like it. It had a sense of practical effects. I mean, of course, it still relied on computer effects in some of the
Yeah.
special effects sequences. I understand, but I do
Yeah.
like that. It reminded me of the sort of quote unquote good old days of Tom Savini and
Yeah.
the
Oh
old
yeah.
school Friday the 13th films. Especially like
Yeah.
Part 4 or something like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good choice. Very good choice. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please. Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm sorry. And like I said, please don't let me be long-winded. But that's what, like, now that you say it, maybe the last big, like, I know there's CG in the movie, but maybe the last like super effects heavy movie like that in quite a while. Because I think they would do much, much more with CG now. Um, but yeah, and especially when we got some movies like Manhattan, Jason Goes to Manhattan, and it didn't necessarily give you the payoff of him being in Manhattan. You get the payoff of Freddy and Jason fighting. You
Yep.
know, like
That's right. Yep.
so
That's
as a
right.
fan, you're always kind of weary. You're like, are they gonna really give me what they're selling me? You know,
Yeah.
and I feel like they really did pay off, especially that last 30 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah,
agree. And you have to remember too the wait for this film and the anticipation for
forever.
this film. It
Yeah,
was just through the roof. It was when is this going to film come out? When is this going to come out? As we mentioned before, I think in our Nightmare on Elm Street discussions
hmm,
about what was the anticipation after, as you mentioned, how Jason Goes to Hell, Final Friday closed. The anticipation was just through the roof, and then what was what was going to happen in terms of New Line and all this stuff.
yeah,
I think it paid off those that anticipation really nicely. So
yeah,
it's a real and it respected each of the characters' legacies. I think
hmm,
really well. So as you mentioned, fan service, but I think it did it really well. Yeah.
yeah. That intro, I remember being in the movie theater, and like the one that Freddie narrates, and man, I used to talk like this with my S's. I remember going over to my brother and be like, "That's so sweet." Yeah, man, it was
That
just
was that was a wonderful return. Yeah, I remember
yeah,
too that introduction. It was so great and
yeah,
scary and
yeah,
creepy. Yeah, and it was just a return to that world or the worlds. Yeah,
yeah.
but well done. Yep. So this is your number 7 choice.
Number 7.
Okay, let's continue on. So what's your number 6 favorite Friday the 13th film, my friend?
All right. So, really, from this point on, I think we got, arguably all of these are gold in my book. I think there's so
Okay.
many great movies in this franchise. Um, I know we're not at the top, but we're getting there because I got Jason Lives as my next, and again, these the plots are still like, we got some new people at Camp Crystal Lake, and Jason ain't gonna be cool about it, But what I do love is that they kind of took a franchise that they weren't really sure what the next step was, and they kind of did the Frankenstein thing,
Yep.
making Jason a zombie and really making him scary, like uh with just, he's powerful, he's lumbering, he looks almost unstoppable, um and you really start to care for these characters. It takes me a little while to warm up, especially this last viewing, to some of the characters, but when it comes to Tom Matthews as Tommy, and then Megan especially, they have that. I think a lot of the humor hits too, because they have that funny, like, car chase or scene, where they're trying to avoid the cops. I was like, and it actually, I've seen these movies a lot, and it actually still made me laugh. And I thought that, that gives it up to the director and what he was trying to do, and it was not so serious. And who is it? John Travolta. What was his nephew that plays the one counselor? He's like, Nikki, what are you taking a dump?
Yeah.
it's
There.
so
Yeah.
it's so stupid, but it's so hilarious. Uh,
Yeah. The one and paintball. Yeah, it's got everything. This film's
yeah,
got everything. It's got it's
yeah,
got it's got handsome Tommy. I guess yeah, that's a knock.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
all the actors are handsome in their own way, I suppose. But
yeah, yeah,
this was in particular. It was the heroic Tommy versus
yeah,
the slightly. You're not quite sure. We'll talk about it when we get to part five, I suppose.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, but he's now no doubt he's the hero. If you had any
yeah,
doubt by the end of five what was going to happen to Tommy. Here's okay. It's not a problem. Not a problem. He's here to stop Jason. Although I must say, if you're gonna dig up Jason's grave, just wait until it's a sunny day.
yeah,
Don't do it like
yeah,
in
yeah,
a thunderstorm or anything like that, because
yeah,
you're begging for trouble. But you're right. This is a film that I think had everything, and um, it was the true kind of return of Jason Voorhees, especially for those again who had Part Five lingering in the back of their minds. Right, when I'll get to Part Five, of course,
hmm,
when we get to it. But in many ways, this film could be labeled a new beginning, but as it happens, it's called
yeah,
Jason Lives, just to be really emphatic
yeah,
about it. And it is a return to form in a manner of speaking. And I like too. There's a lot of suspense scenes as well. I mean, there are children there as well, and
yep,
so you see some of the scenes where you feel like they can be in real danger.
yep,
And you have the killings, which seem a bit over the top, but doesn't cross the line into just. I mean, there's one with in the wall and everything like that. That feels
yeah.
like it feels a bit Terminator 2-ish, but
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, the liquid metal guy kind of look
yeah,
to it. But that's okay. I'm okay with that. Um, but yeah, it's veering into this sort of this off the wall creativity types of kills. But it's still giving us the Friday the 13th vibe that is, I think, paying respect and homage to what we saw up to that. So yeah, Jason Lives. It's really great. Yeah, I agree.
yeah. Yeah. And that's why it's really, like, I know I said it before, it's really hard. I think on any day, these could change, like my grading. Maybe not the final two or three, but I think these one I just urge people, go out, buy this box set. Yeah, especially if it's on sale, like, you'll need it. Just watch them all, enjoy it,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, I agree. I agree. It's one of the best. It's one of my favorite sets. I really
I
do.
know, like
But
who would have thought they would have put out something this nice for
yeah,
Friday the 13th? It's fantastic.
yeah. But so this is okay. So number six is your number six, right? So
Oh
part
yeah,
six is
yeah,
your number
yeah.
six. So okay. So Jason Lives is your number six. And what? So let's go to your number five favorite Friday the 13th film. So Tanner, what's your number five favorite film? the
All
Friday the
right.
13th series.
This might be kind of an upset, but I've got it right here.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot, and there's a lot to be said about Friday the 13th. I think it's way more than just a Halloween ripoff. I think, you know, some people might watch it today and say like, "Oh, this movie is just full of horror movie tropes." But I'm like, dude, no, this one started everything. Like, you got the crazy guy telling people to stay away from the camp. How many other camping horror movies were made after this? Like, I know after Halloween, you had so many people doing. Oh, you had like Graduation Day, and then you had like April Fool's Day. But like, how many camp slashers came out after this? Um, and sometimes, not all the time, I think, if you were to change things up a little bit, this could be almost on the giallo level. Like, I know it's kind of
Yeah.
like still a mystery. It's not 100% there, but you still got, if they were to tweak, maybe have that fish out of water kind of, if you put a fish out of water main character in there, you're like, boom, that's it right there. Um, but yeah, there are some things that are so scary in this one too. So that very first kill by, of course, Mrs. Voorhees, when she was like, "Oh, I think Crystal Lake is that way," and then you just hear the car speeding up. I'm like, dude, that's scary. I don't care who you are. That soundtrack kicks in, and you're like, "Oh man, this is something really bad about to happen." And then, you know, I think a lot of the deaths are off screen now after this watch, which is kind of a bummer, but that's why there's part two, you know.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
had to do the blueprint to everything,
Yeah.
because it's radically different to Halloween.
Yeah, I agree. This is a very kind of experimental
Yeah,
film in the context of the Friday the 13th series, or very, you're right, it's a very radical film,
yeah,
especially when we see how it goes. It is a mystery film, although you don't get all the pieces until kind of the
yeah,
last.
yeah,
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 yeah, so, yeah. So you don't quite, yeah, yeah. I mean, it would have been interesting if they had introduced the Mrs. Voorhees character early in the film. That would have made it
yeah,
into kind of a bona fide kind of mystery,
yeah,
and along the lines of almost a giallo type, which I think would have been an interest. I mean, not that it's not interesting now; it's really, really fascinating
yeah.
how they revealed it, and
Hmm.
that final fight. I mean, that final fight is just endless. It just goes on, and
Yeah,
I love it. Just and like there's a bit where they're like just ramming her head in there. I just relentless. It's just and then like the bit at the end. I love the. How do I do it? How did it? Here we go. Here, so it's like this, right? So okay, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, so, yeah, it's great. It's great. So, anyway, so it's. I mean, there's so much to say about this, and as you say, it's really interesting to see. Of course, there's this. You can watch it uncut or
Hmm.
theatrical version, and as you cited earlier, there are some differences, very
Yeah,
famous, notable differences. Some very quick, obviously, but even so the effects, right? They are very shocking and they're very kind of scary, but there
yeah,
a lot of it is also very much the you kind of see you hear something and suddenly you see someone with an axe in there. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
It's that kind of makeup effect. And so there's a lot to be said about the first film, maybe not the second film as you mentioned, but I think this film, although you do see a lot, you do see some very memorable things on screen, but
yeah,
you do. It's surprising to remind us how much of it is off screen as well,
yeah,
which I think is also very fast. But it's that balance between what the gore on screen and then what you're left to the imagination off screen. So.
yeah.
And yeah, I think the famous one, or one of the famous ones, is obviously the Kevin Bacon one.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, that's great. And I love Mrs. Voorhees' sweater. I think it's a great sweater.
yeah,
I
and
don't know
just
what.
just Mrs. Voorhees in this movie in general, like that's one thing I think people miss is that they try to put that character in other movies, and it's not. God, what's her name? I'm blanking on her name.
Oh, Betsy Palmer.
Betsy Palmer, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, she does because there's during the fight she almost like shrills like a cat, man. Do you know what I'm saying? Like she does such a good job in the role, and it's kind of hard to replace that.
that's
Uh,
right.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
and yeah, it's just
There's a bit where she said, kill her, mommy, kill her. She's speaking as Jason.
yeah,
She's talking to herself at first as Mrs. Voorhees and then as Jason. So it's
yeah,
there's that real. It's really creepy.
yeah,
And I don't know if that's followed up as much in any of the other films where Mrs. Voorhees appears. So,
yeah,
but yeah, yeah, that's a good choice. So this is your number five favorite.
yeah. Number
Okay,
5.
so let's go now to your number four favorite Friday the 13th film.
All right. I hope you got your 3D glasses on, man. So,
Okay.
man, and like I said, I feel like at this point, I feel like all of these are like like one of my kids now because they're so interchangeable. I love this one, even though I don't know why, but during this viewing, I was like, there's a lot of this movie that's out of focus. Like this is killing my eyes right now. I don't know
Yeah.
if you've ever experienced that watching part three, but I was like, oh man. Um, but
It is a bit blurry in some places. Yeah, I think
yeah,
to take into account the 3D effect that was inherent in the photography. Yeah.
yeah. And sadly I've never had a 3D TV, so I've seen the DVD release with the red and blue glasses, which is pretty cool, but I've never seen like the newer release of it. I hear it's pretty cool too though. um, but as far as plot, really there's just some more kids at Crystal Lake. You get, I think what kind of threw me off is that in this movie you you spend a lot of different time with characters that you would think would get saved for. I think it's Chris is the main character's name, but you spend a lot of time with Shelly and Vera in this one
Yeah,
too,
that's right.
that
That's right.
you
Yeah, yeah.
you almost get attached. You're like, man, are they, you know that's the weird thing about having an ensemble cast that's got a lot of different parts. I could say that for Jason X too. Like the ensemble cast, you kind of feel a little bit detached from the main character, and you start gravitating towards the other ones. Um, but I think this one really figured out how to plan and execute like the Scooby Doo gang. You got a lot of cool people that you kind of differentiate from one another, and then you really get to like. And I think it has a lot of character. I think even the 3D gimmicky stuff is cool. I got nostalgia from that. Um,
Or like
and I,
juggling in the camera and
yeah,
like going like hey, yeah. I love or like the
yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's great. Yeah,
the snake in the
yeah,
chicken coop.
yeah. It's
you know,
yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, or like the
yeah,
popcorn or something like that, or just throw yeah the fruit
yeah,
throwing yeah, it's great. Or the eyeball
yeah.
yeah. So
And it's one of the movies that use kind of like the secondary antagonist before the later entries in the sequel with the biker gang. I think that was a pretty smart move. But even still, when quote unquote Jason was in his prime, um, I think because I generally, when I first saw this movie, I had a lot of tension. Like, oh man, they have to deal with this biker gang, and then they got to deal with Jason. But the biker gang doesn't last all that long when it
although at
comes.
the yeah, but he comes back at like the very end, kind of. And no,
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 yeah,
yeah, it's great. Yeah, so he was yeah all the time he was just waiting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, so yeah, that's a really good point about the layering and sort of the past with the trauma of Jason with the main character,
I
and then all of
know,
a
yeah,
sudden, yeah, and then the kind of obviously the hockey mask is introduced, the now the
yeah,
iconic
iconic.
hockey mask. You get to see more of it. It's a different look of in terms of the makeup, obviously.
Hmm.
So I think they're still working on that, although you feel like it gets its bearings obviously from part two to part four.
Yeah,
But there's still a lot of consistencies there. So we have to remember all this is happening within the scope of a few days, right?
yep,
And this is one of those days. So it's just adding more of that the sort of mythology from the three films. It's got a great score. There's some
Yeah.
real, I mean, the Friday 13th films that we haven't mentioned. Well, I guess we have, but there are a lot of toilet scenes in the Friday the 13th film. This has one of I mean, you can rank them in terms of best
Yeah.
toilet related
Yeah.
scenes in Friday. And this has a really nasty toilet scene.
I
It's
know.
pretty
Yeah.
nasty, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think the scares are really scary, and
Hmm.
you're right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in terms of the gimmick and the 3D.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just one of those things too. Like I was mentioning earlier, this is. I mean, maybe I should have mentioned it here too. This is where you do get a kind of variation on a theme. Now going 3D. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. Okay, so this is your number four.
It's my number four. We're down.
Okay,
I'm down
so
to my
so
three.
let's save your top three to the next part of the video. But let me go to my number 12 to number four. But before I do, my friend, again, please
Yeah.
remind us again what is your number 12 all the way down to number four favorite in terms of Friday the 13th. So number 12 is
So number 12, I got Jason Goes to Hell,
okay.
and then for number 11, I got Jason X. For number 10, I got the remake from 2009. And believe it, number 9, I've got The New Blood. Number 8, I've got Jason Takes Manhattan. Number 7, I've got Freddy versus Jason. Number 6, I got Jason Lives. Number 5, I've got the original Friday the 13th. And then for number 4, I've got Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3 dimensions.
Fantastic. Okay, and then we'll wait for your final three a little bit later. But let me now turn to my favorites here. So number 12 all the way
I'm
to down to
excited.
number four. So okay, so and we've mentioned them here. So my number 12. So I don't think I mean I do admire this one very much as I mentioned earlier when you mentioned it. But where did and I don't even know where. Oh, here it is. So take it from the set. So this is my number 12. This is my number 12. The remake.
Okay.
Okay, and I have to say, I have to establish the caveat here. Generally speaking, I am not necessarily one for the remakes, just in general. I it's just not in my it's not in my DNA, I suppose. If I'm going to
Yeah.
watch a Friday the 13th film, this is probably not the one I'm going to go to.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm going to need a lot of like I'm going to need to watch some Friday the 13th films before watching this one or putting it in the player.
Yeah.
But that being said, of the remakes, I think this is one of the stronger ones. It really is for the reasons that you cited. I think it handles the lore really, really well. And I think it has a good degree of suspense, and I think it has a good degree of that type of genre expectation. But it handles it very well. It feels like its own. They're like two or three movies, mini
Hmm.
movies packed into one film, which I really admire. And I like the structure of this. So I admire that very much. I mean, it is at a slight disadvantage, maybe inherently, and it's not the fault of the film, but it's just the nature of remakes in general. But I think for what it's worth as a remake, I think it does it very well. I would have liked to have seen some of the story continue in further films, but of course we won't see those.
I know. Yeah.
We'll see how the Friday the 13th series gets revitalized, hopefully, with further stories, whether it's on TV or maybe not on TV. I don't know,
I know. Yeah.
for what it's worth, I think we do get, as I say, two or three films packed into one. So I do admire that approach.
Yep.
But it does make me. I have to say, when I watch this film, or I have to build myself up into putting this in the player, and then when I watch this film, I immediately feel like I want to go back to some of the earlier films. So maybe
Yeah.
that's just inherent in the remake structure as well. But it's not exclusive to this film. It's also how I feel about other of the remakes.
Yeah. It's like
So
cauliflower rice, man.
it's like, well, that's interesting. So the Friday the 13th remake is like cauliflower rice.
It's like cauliflower rice, man.
Wow.
I
So
know
it
that's so
makes
dumb.
wow.
But
That's
it's
fascinating.
Yeah, because you sit down, you're gonna have this bounty. You think you're gonna have like a nice meal, you're gonna have some regular rice, but no, it's just cauliflower. It looks like it. It might even look like it with all the rest of the food, but no, it's just cauliflower in a
I
blender.
like that.
Or,
I like that. So yeah, it
yeah,
does have it's Friday the 13th remake is like cauliflower rice. I really
cauliflower
like
rice.
that. Fantastic. That's great. I love that. I'm yeah, that blows my mind. That's fantastic. So, but anyway, that's my number 12. And again, it's not like it's not a. I don't think it's the worst film I've ever seen. I think it's really strong. But
Yeah,
just for me, there are 11 other films in the Friday the 13th series that I think I will probably list higher, and that's what I've done here. So,
mm,
but it's okay. As you mentioned, too, I think it is for a certain maybe generation. I think it is a good
yeah,
way into the films, and as you mentioned, maybe for some
yeah.
people, the first two, three, four films are just they're from the '80s, and from my point of view, they still feel fresh and new. But maybe for people who are
Me
younger
too.
than I,
Yeah,
they might feel old or they might feel antiquated or dated, which might make the option of going to this remake version more palatable. And I completely understand that.
yeah,
But just me, because I grew up with these films, and so I have a tendency to go towards the more old school films. But again, this I think is a valiant effort. But again, inherent in remakes, and that's just my own feeling about it. It makes you
yeah,
want to go back to the old films.
yeah.
But it's I think a really good effort all the same. So that's my number 12.
Okay.
So and then my number 11 is, let's see, where did it go? Yes, my number 11. This is my number 11. So this is
Ah,
it's you can cut it either ways. In one of two ways, I think. It's either my 11th favorite Friday the 13th film or my number one favorite Friday the 13th film with David Cronenberg in it.
yeah,
So so it's either
yeah,
one of those or both at the same time. Um, I how should I put it? It doesn't feel like a Friday the 13th film to me.
mm,
I know it is a Friday the 13th film, but it doesn't feel like it. I mean, this and Jason Goes to Hell, the Final Friday, feel like they are. Let's take Jason and put him in a different type of film, kind
yeah,
of film. So, I mean, Jason Voorhees is that strong a character, I understand, but this feels obviously for me, and at least like the types of films that I'm used to, especially
mm-hmm,
going to the quote unquote the first four, first five, which might
yeah,
give you an indication of where my list is going to go at the end of the day here. But
mm-hmm,
so and how should I put it? I don't. There's always when I watch a Friday the 13th film, there's always this element of feeling scared. There's some
yeah,
scenes that I still get jumpy about or jump scares or even now after watching the film so many times I don't feel that way about when I watch Jason X, but I do feel having a wonderful comic turn. I like how it has a genre bending element to it. It is a sci-fi action horror film. It has some comedy, it has some romance to it. I do
mm-hmm,
like Jason's death here. I think it feels very definitive.
yeah,
And in fact, I mean, in many ways, it's more definitive. I mean, his death here is more definitive than, say, his death in the final chapter.
yeah,
I mean, a lot was said about Tom Savini in the final chapter. Really, he said, I'm going to be the one who's going to end Jason. But, I mean, what's more definitive? You get a machete into sliced into the mid part of your head, or you're going to burn up in the atmosphere.
yeah,
I would say burning up is probably more definitive than getting the machete sliced in
yeah,
the top of your forehead. But
yeah,
who am I? Who am I? But
yeah,
I'm not Tom Savini. But in any event, I mean, so it has that kind of going for it. I mean, if you're going to think, how are you going to kill Jason? You think, okay, let's just burn him up in the atmosphere. That's
yeah,
probably, yeah, that and just take care of him like that. Why didn't we think of this when we were trying to kill him in the final chapter? That's what they should have
yeah,
done. They should have brought him up to a high, like Corey Feldman should have brought him up to the highest point and just threw him out, and so he could have burned up into the atmosphere. That would have been the final chapter. But anyway, so so it has that kind of stuff going for it, and it does have that great holodeck, Star Trek: The Next Generation type of feel to it. It does have
yeah,
the android,
mm-hmm,
Terminator type of feel to it.
yeah,
It does. It also has a kind of anime feel to it.
yeah,
and the unstoppable Jason, which also adds to a sense of parody. So I do like it in the sense that it knows, I think, where it is making fun of itself in a very playful and witty way, while just saying Jason's in space. So and it does that concept very well. But again, I have to put this. I have to say, right. I grew up with the old school films, and so
Yeah.
this is not this is very far from that type of feel. But it's not
Yeah.
like I don't have fun with this film. I do have a lot of fun with this film. But again, it feels very far from my feelings when I watched the say the earlier films. But that's how I feel. So
Yeah.
that's Jason X. So that's my number 11. Number 10. Okay, here we go. This. So as you mentioned,
Ah,
you said your 12, 11, 10. They could have been interchangeable. And here, what
exactly.
am I doing? I'm kind of.
Hey.
We did this. We do this a lot, my friend. I think we
Yeah.
did this with the other list. We kind of had a great overlap.
Hmm.
And I feel similarly to you. I think these three films might be interchangeable 12, 11, 10. Let me start with I think it has a very intriguing setup. I think the marketing, you're absolutely right, is in many ways it sells the movie more than the movie itself, which I think is
Yeah. Yeah.
the gold standard in terms of successful marketing.
Yeah.
You got the pictures, the Jason makeup, and I understand maybe in practice it might look kind of overly gooey with the flesh overtaking the mask and all. But when these images first came out, when you saw them like photos, it was
Yeah.
mind blowing. This was really
Yeah.
mind blowing stuff, and it was what is this? And I remember the excitement was. I felt that it was so exciting to see these posters, see these images, and you watch the film, and I was like, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so you've got this kind of worm thing, and you kind of eat it, or people eat, they get possessed and they eat this thing, and it looks like a I don't know, like a giant sausage or a giant moving, like a giant moving turd or something like that. That's this
Yeah.
worm turd thing, and
Yeah.
okay, so and it was going into that whole realm of let's try to develop this mythology that just comes out of nowhere. And it happened in a lot of the film franchises that we've talked about. It happened with Nightmare on Elm Street, with Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. It happened
Yeah.
with Thorn and Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, and it does this with Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday. It's okay. It's not bad, and I think for what it's worth, it really explores the mythology as well as it could. It's just, I think it does feel like it feels like it could have maybe gone through a bit more of a maybe one more polish before
Yeah.
it was made. I think it would have done wonders for it in terms of matching the mythology, or maybe trying to link it with past films as best it could. I know in terms of IP and what they could do and what they couldn't do, what characters they could bring back or what they couldn't bring back. I understand that, so they had to kind of try to make a new film out of it.
Hmm.
And in that way, I think it's an interesting and attempt and endeavor, but it is its own thing. It does feel like it's trying to tie itself to the mythology of the earlier films, but it doesn't feel. It feels like its own thing.
Yeah.
And so so in that way, I think it does feel somewhat, for my money, a bit foreign to the world of the Friday the 13th films that I enjoy immensely. So in that way, it maybe I don't engage with it as much as the other films. But as I
Hmm.
mentioned before, I think it does a really good effort in trying to establish the lineage of the Voorhees and the sort of the souls and heaven, and or I guess not heaven but hell, and the weaponry
Yeah. Yeah.
and the like. So it's trying to build that. It almost feels like a Nordic or Nordic mythology
Yeah.
adapted to the Friday the 13th, which I think is quite fascinating.
Yeah.
And or like Lord of the Rings meets Friday the 13th in a way. So,
Yeah. I was getting
but
weird, like, Phantasm sequel vibes too.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
yeah,
Yeah,
do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, yeah,
still adjacent to different horror series, but not quite a Friday the 13th, you know?
yeah. Yeah, so I that's a really good yeah, Phantasm. That's a really good comparison. So yeah, and again, it's doing something very different which I admire very much. I mean, these films, the Friday the 13th films, what's so great about them is that they each are, I mean, maybe arguably some more than others, but a large part of the films are doing their own thing.
Yep.
And so you're getting a lot of different spices. And this
Yep.
is definitely a very, very interesting take on it. So if you feel bored with what you've seen, if you feel like all the Friday the 13th films are all the same, you should watch this film. This is really different.
Yeah.
Very, very different film, as is Jason X, as some of the other films. But in any event, that's how I slice it in terms of my 12, 11, and 10. Okay, so that's 12, 11, and 10. So number 9. Okay, number 9 is which one is it? Here we go. Where is it? Okay, this might be a little bit controversial as well. Number 9 is this one. Okay.
Ah, okay,
All
okay.
right, the New Blood. So I feel the same as you, or similarly as you. I think, how should I put it? I have the films that are, say, the 6, 7, 8 films. I think this is the film that I had the least experience with.
Hmm.
This was the film that, for whatever reason, I couldn't get in the video store when I was
Oh,
growing
really?
up, or maybe I could, but it was the one that I couldn't watch as often. But it was the one I did. I remember feeling somewhat underwhelmed by it because I was expecting a kind of gore fest when I was a young kid. And
Yeah.
while I got some of those scenes, I also felt like I didn't get some of those scenes. What I got instead, though, was a really interesting battle, right, between Laura Park Lincoln character and then Jason Voorhees character. And it's a good follow up to what we had in the earlier film, Jason Lives. But and right, it's Carrie versus Jason, or maybe you get, or maybe Carrie, or maybe it's a lot of eyebrows versus, like psychic eyebrows versus. There's a
Yeah.
lot of the like that, the
Yeah.
eyebrows. So I really like that.
Yeah.
I like it when films show us the eyebrow action. I'm all for eyebrows, but it in that way it's a good kind of battle scene. But if you had to press me at the end of the day, it's not one that I'm going to say that it's going to top my list.
Hmm.
And I think it does feel like uh, um, yeah, it does feel like maybe what could have been,
Yeah.
what might have been in terms of how some of the special effects played itself out. But there are some intense scenes, there are some scary scenes, there are some very creative ways in which, especially I think the battle scenes, I think are very creative. With the chains and the whole bit. And I guess also for me, I kind of go back and forth in terms of how the film ends.
I
On
know.
the one hand, it's kind of okay, that's kind of random, or you can kind of say, okay, that works. I mean, it's creative. It's creative.
Yeah.
It's certainly not like burning him up in the atmosphere kind of definitive, but it's
Yeah.
certainly there. Okay, I like the close up of the guy too when he comes back to life. Oh, yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So there are moments where I think it does feel like it's a burst of creativity, but it also feels somewhat underwhelming at times. But I think
Mm.
if you balance those things out, it still is an overall good experience. And it does have the camp vibes. It has the nature vibes, which is very much part of the decor of Friday the 13th. Again, it does that very well. And it's trying to do something different, which is eyebrow psychic powers versus zombie Jason. And the makeup
Yeah.
is really fantastic in terms of zombie Jason too. So,
Yeah.
but and then as you mentioned, Kane Hodder's performance.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So that's my number 9. Okay, number 9. So my number 8. Okay, number 8 film. Okay, is this film. There we go. That's my number
Oh,
8.
okay.
Okay, number 8 is Freddy versus Jason. So this is a film that, again, I strongly admire, as I do the other films. I strongly admire. Now I don't have it at the top of my list because what can I say? It is, I think it's a film that feels It feels like its own thing. It doesn't feel like how this is like my fan. This is the ultimate fan service film. So in that way, in my head, I always feel like it's its own separate entity. I know it's
Yeah,
linking to the past films in the way that it does, and it does it really well. And as I mentioned before, I think it respects the lore very well. But
yeah,
if you had to ask me, does it is it falling in the line of the link of the chronology of the world that we saw from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? I would say I don't know. And so
yeah,
that's why maybe it doesn't necessarily and again that's again maybe I'm showing my hand here in terms of my own list and my love for the old school films.
yeah,
So I think what makes this not number one for me is that it's just not the one of the old school film era films,
yeah,
and that's not a knock against it. It's just maybe inherent in. So maybe that's unfair of me to say that, but it's my list, so I have to
yeah,
put it somewhere. But that being said, it is a. I think it respects the lore so well. It does the balancing act between Freddy and Jason so well. I mean, it does.
yeah.
I think favor Freddy in terms of the psychology, but Freddy's the one he's articulate. He speaks. He can narrate, and so Jason's got a disadvantage there in terms of telling the story. But I think still, given those disadvantages, the Jason storyline is expressed really well. And you feel this adrenaline rush when they finally do their final battle in the real
Yeah,
world, and the music kicks in and all that. So
yeah,
it's I think a great exciting film, especially to watch in the movie theater. So
yeah.
okay, so that's
Do you
12.
remember
Yeah,
your
please go ahead. Yeah.
thoughts? No, do you remember your thoughts on seeing it in the movie theater? Did like has have you had one that you originally disliked and then it got better for you over the years out of the ones that
Oh,
you've mentioned?
well, this was the one that I saw in the theater that it was so much fun watching in the theater. And I don't dislike this film.
Uh-huh.
I don't dislike any of the films here, but I think this had this. It feels like it's a film that succeeds most effectively as a movie theater experience,
Yeah, definitely.
rather than as a Blu-ray experience. Not to say that it's not fun watching it on on your TV at home, but it's so much
Hmm.
fun watching it in the theater. I just had so much. It was such a great atmosphere,
I
and
know.
when you watch it for the first time, some of those the kill scenes are really scary.
Yeah.
You don't quite know what's going to happen, but then and there are some scenes that are really sad, actually, in terms of some of the death scenes as well. So it has
Yeah.
some emotional punches, but I would say it's most effective as a movie theater experience. Now, to
Yeah.
answer your question, were there films in the series that I maybe disliked but then began to like more? Maybe I would feel that way about maybe Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I remember not quite liking it when I first saw it. I was quite disappointed by it, but I'm getting around to it quite heavily. Although I admit I rank it somewhat low on my 12 list here, but I think there's still a lot of strong merits to it. But I think that's the one that I would probably cite.
Okay, cool. No, that's cool,
How
man.
about how about you?
No, I would probably say the same too. I think that there would probably be if you would have asked me maybe a couple years ago whether it was worth watching, I might even have been like, nah, you can skip it. But I think if you're going to take the time and if you've already invested in at least half the series, I would say go for it. You know, you've gone this far. You've taken this much terrain. You practically have a cabin at Crystal Lake by now, you know.
That's right. That's right.
You know.
Yeah, yeah, but no. I mean, yeah, it's not a. I mean, it's a really fascinating film in terms of what it's trying to do with the mythology. That's for
Yeah.
sure. But anyway, so that's my 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. So that's my number 8 film, Freddy versus
Okay.
Jason. So my number 12, number 11, number 10, number 9, and number
Mhm.
8. Okay, so now let's go to number 7. Let's see here. Number 7. Ah, here we go. Number 7 is this one. Where is it? Where is it? Uh oh, where is it? Here it is. Yes. So number 7. Here we go. Yes.
Ah,
So yes, Jason Takes Manhattan. Although I must say that it was around this time that there's also the film called The Muppets Take Manhattan. So whenever I think of Jason Takes Manhattan, I always think of The Muppets Take Manhattan. So it would have been really cool if that would have been a really cool crossover. You know,
yeah,
Freddy versus
yeah.
Jason. You know, The Muppets versus Jason. But anyway, I digress. So Jason Takes Manhattan, or as you mentioned, Jason takes like a boat and then Canada.
Yeah,
And then right, there's a lot of toxic waste. I don't know
too
how people
much.
have like yeah, I don't know how people in who were like New Yorkers feel about this film. You know, I'm not a New
I know.
Yorker, but I would be like what gives? You think that you know my city's got all this toxic waste? What gives? But anyway, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's some interesting playful moments. I think for what it's worth, I think if this was called, you know, Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason takes a ship and then uh, Canada. I think that would have been really cool. I would have been okay with that, you know, because
Yeah.
that you know, okay, I understand what it is, and I understand what's on the tin, and so I can walk in with those expectations because on its face, with that information, you watch the film and it's not that it's really quite effective. I like the. I like the way it handles the scenes on the ship. There's some cool little teamwork scenes.
Yeah.
The whole thing about it made me very scared of saunas. You know, with the whole thing with the sauna
Oh
rock
yeah.
and the thing, it was really scary.
Yeah.
I like the bit about the couple on on the boat, which just happens to come across the place where Jason is you know under, and then the
Yeah.
right and like I like the girlfriend as she's trying to hide from Jason. It's like you know I love that wonderful performance. It's really great, and of course I mentioned Jason being a great swimmer,
Yeah.
and I mean there's the great boxing scene.
Yeah.
Right, it goes down as being one of the great. I mean, there are a lot of scenes involving beheadings and
Yeah.
the heads. So this I think goes down very very surprising way that fight ends. Very surprising. So
Yeah.
you know it makes one wonder how would the like would Rocky, you know, the film Rocky that won the
Yeah.
Academy Award, if the film Rocky ended the way the boxing scene in Jason Takes Manhattan ended, would it still have won the Academy Award? You know,
Yeah.
just
Just
have
one
that as a
decapitation.
yes, have that as a thought experiment. You know,
Yeah.
Adrian, boom, boom, and
Yeah.
Rocky's head flies into Adrian's
Yeah.
lap or something like that. Would have
Yeah.
been very interesting. But in any event, it's a very creative way to handle that dilemma from Jason's. How am I going to handle this guy who's just trying to punch me here?
Yeah.
So he handles it quite well considering the circumstances. You know, the fight on the rooftop, but and also the whole bit with the right. There's the one of the right the that scenes involving immolation and fire, and they don't stop to help. There's like, oh, this is reminding of. So there's this and the little the trinket that the kind of the would be boyfriend gives her. It's like this
Hmm.
little like New York thing. It's really quite cute, and so there are all these things that are I think the devil in the details, but I think it's quite devilishly detailed in that way, and I admired very much. And this I must say is one of
Yeah.
the films that I saw again anticipating so much in the video store era. It did come, of course, a little bit later because it's part 8, but
Yeah.
I think for all that it's you know all the faults, all the warts, and all make it a fun ride all around. So I think maybe again, had it been called Jason Takes a Boat, that would have been I think really icing on the cake. But
Yeah.
oh well. Oh,
And Daisuke, I don't know if I told you though, but Stephen King might have used this pen.
it's
Like
amazing.
they never
Yeah,
say that
yeah,
he did. They say that he might have.
yeah, yeah. So. Yeah, it's that yeah, all these presents. Yeah, it's these great kind of presents in this film. You're right, absolutely right. But you know, I mean, obviously, right? You know, what does young Jason look like? I mean, you know, does
Yeah.
it look this way
True
or does it
connection.
that way? What's going on? Yeah, or
Yeah.
what's up with the past and like talking Jason at before the very end there and
Yeah.
and all this. And you know, there's an unmasking scene, but you don't see his face, I think. But I would have loved to have seen Jason's face. I do. Oh, actually, no, you're right. You do see
At
his
the
face. What
very
am I
at
saying?
the very
Yeah, at the very end. Yeah, yeah.
he almost looks like a sad old man.
Yeah, yeah, he does. He looks very sad. Yeah, you know, like, oh, very
He just
cute.
starts
He looks.
throwing up.
Yeah, yeah, and so he quite cute. So quite far from the part seven Jason, which had that kind of
No.
decay look to it. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, and as you say, there's the guitar scene and trying to find him, and
Yeah.
so in any event, this is my was it 10, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. That's my number 7 favorite, right? Did I
I
write
love it.
12,
And
11,
I will
10? Yep.
I will forever now. So part 8 for me now will be about presents. Jason's presents, and then the gifts.
That's right. That's right. It's all about yes. It's to just beware if you get a present
Yeah.
before going on a ship. But in any
Yeah.
event, so this is my number. That's right, my number 7 favorite. So 12, 11,
Yeah.
10, 9, 8, 7. So let's go to number 6.
Okay.
Number 6 favorite one is this one. So I think our lists are probably shaping up. I think this is your number 6 as well.
Okay.
Yes,
Very
Jason Lives.
interesting.
Jason Lives. So our lists I think are kind of overlapping.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a spot that's a little bit different here and there, but more or less it's they're congealing in the same direction, I think. And
Yeah.
you know, Jason Lives. So I consider this for me. This is like Star Trek: The Next Generation, Jason. Whereas the first films are the original crew Star Trek. This is
Hmm.
the Star Trek Next Generation. So you know, I really like the Next Generation very much. I love Star Trek: The Next Generation, but my heart will always go with the original crew, and so in that way, this won't top my list. I know it tops a lot of people's list. This is their
Yeah.
for a lot of people their number 1 or number 2 favorite Friday the 13th film, and good for you,
Yeah.
because I can definitely see that, and this is in many ways a Jason film for a kind of new generation in a manner of speaking. And
Yeah.
it's a new Jason, although it is also the old Jason. So it has that
Yeah.
lineage, and it does very well, and it's very creative. It goes in a lot of places, so many characters. It's like Jason is attacking an entire town, kind of
No. Yeah.
thing. So I love that sweep, and it's really expanding the world, and the whole issue with Tommy and the sheriff and the daughter and the kids and working out. So that's all there. I love that. Now, what again? It would have been so cool if we had seen part 5 Tommy in part 6. Now what?
Yeah.
Now I love Tommy. I love Tommy as a character, but I must
Yeah.
say that it does feel like it. What happened to the part 5 Tommy that we saw, right? And as you know,
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't either of us has spoken about part 5 yet, which is interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it feels like this feels like it's the same Tommy, but it's a completely different Tommy. So that always throws me for a loop here. So
Yeah.
and that's what maybe makes me hesitate to put it, say, in the number 1 or number 2 spot. But for what it's worth, I do like the duel between Tommy and Jason. Although they had to sideline Tommy for like most of the film in order for Jason to wreak havoc. Otherwise,
Yeah.
he would have taken care of it really early. But in any event, this is my number 6. Is Friday the 13th Part 6? Jason Lives. I do like the opening titles, by the way.
Oh yeah.
It's just standing in it's the James Bond logo.
Yeah. And very
Yeah, walk.
you get similar vibes to that. Like by the time you get to like 7 or 8, you're like, all right, this is like the horror James Bond.
That's right. That's right. And it's cool like that. So
Yeah.
totally with it. So, but anyways, that's my number 6. So number 5 favorite Friday the 13th film is right here, and I think you mentioned it here. So,
Ah.
yeah, it's great. It's great with the whole disco kind of
I know,
vibe.
so good.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah. What can I say? Well, this was one of the first Friday the 13th films I ever saw. It could, I think, actually, it's the first Friday the 13th film I ever saw.
Really?
And I felt bad for Shelley.
I know.
Like
Yeah.
I felt that's you think about what's the worst way to go. That's probably one of the contenders for being one of the worst ways to go in a Friday the 13th film. I feel so bad for him what happens at the
Yeah.
end there, but and that biker guy who just stayed through the entire. He just comes up and he's like,
Yeah.
what? And he was just fighting to stay alive in hiding, and
Yeah.
just comes out and just
Yeah.
gets off like that. But this, in many ways, has a very definitive way of getting rid of Jason. In terms of the kind of the axe and then the hanging and all this, and then
Yeah.
the unmasking and the makeup is kind of creepy. It does look different from part two Jason, and it does look different from part four Jason. So I get that,
Yeah.
but it's for what it's worth. It has a kind of creepy vibe to it. It feels this is like there's the bit with the sort of the like the fingers and the eyeball popping out there. That's the one I enjoy the most.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never. I don't know if I think I would like to see this in the theater in 3D. I
I know
think
that is
that would
so
be
cool.
a truly unforgettable experience. But again, for what it's worth, and it's worth quite a lot to me. This is the one that, in many ways, kind of started it all for me, and I have a
Yeah.
deep affection for this film,
Yeah.
very much. But as I say, when I visited the other films, they just really blew me away in that respect. But part three, it's very important, very special. It establishes the icon of Jason Voorhees, as we know, in a way that will be indelible going
Yeah.
forward with the hockey mask. But so that's my number. What is it? 5. 1, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Yes, number 5. Now, my number 4 favorite film, before we each get to our top 3, here's my number 4 favorite. This is it. Damn. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes. R1.
Okay.
So yeah. So again, we do have some overlap here. Now, this is, as I say, this is a classic film, but it's so fascinating how unlike the other films it is. I mean, in many ways,
Yeah.
part two is the film
Yeah.
that everything stems from, which I totally understand. But it occupies that weird, wonderful, weird thing about looking at the films where you don't have to worry about consistency between the films. You can kind of go
Yeah.
inconsistent and it will still work. And that's what makes Friday the 13th so strong, in my opinion, is how inconsistent it is. So
Hmm.
that's one thing going for this film. It's just so out there. And so for
Yeah.
people who are going to watch these films out of order, and you can watch these films out of order and still be totally surprised. And in fact, I would say that I would recommend watching these films out of order.
Yeah.
Watching part two and then watching part one. But what's going on? This is completely, and it actually makes for a real fun, surprising time, because it's a big surprise if you don't know what's in store
Yeah.
when watching this. And I must say too that they're very violent killings, but they are also done mostly off screen. Although you do see
Yeah.
some of the gore, like the with the one. Oh, I like taking care of kids. I like cooking for kids, and it's all great. No, that and
Yeah.
then Ralph. I love Ralph.
Yeah.
Right, that's it. Ralph. It's got a death curse. So whenever there's the supermarket Ralph's near where I live, and so I always think,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh gosh, wouldn't it be so cool if I saw Ralph actually here? That's his name, Ralph, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If
Okay,
if
yes.
they just had his head out there, like his
Oh,
just him
yeah.
like this.
Yeah, I felt so bad what happens to him in right in the later films. So I wish he
Yeah.
could have been he could have survived in the later films and been like an ongoing. I love his hat, by the way. I love Ralph's
I
hat.
know.
It's a really cool look.
And I will say that there's a moment in this that got me on this previous watch when he's just chilling in their uh, in their fruit or their dry goods like closet, and then they open up their pantry, and then they open them up. He's just chilling in there, and he comes like that is horrifying. I don't know about you, but
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. Uh,
yeah,
and then just chill it, like saying, what do they play? Like, let's play, what is it, the game, Strip Monopoly or something like
Yeah,
that. And
for
I
45
was
minutes of the movie.
yeah, like you kind of, and you kind of don't see the conclusion of the game. I was like, oh gosh, it would have been interesting to see the conclusion of Strip
Yeah,
Monopoly. But any event,
yeah,
but it's really a lot of the stuff does happen off screen, but it's fascinating to see how it goes. And I must say, the fight scene. I mentioned
mhm,
part seven's fight scene. It's really epic. Part six fight scene, I would say, is pretty epic on the boat and or
yeah,
the rowboat and the flames on the lake there. But part one's fight scene,
yeah,
it's just this is pretty intense. Like this is pretty intense. This is
yeah,
I mean, I know it's a different film, but this is like Sigourney Weaver versus the alien queen type of intensity. I
yeah,
would say this is like iconic stuff.
yeah.
Um,
Betsy
and
Palmer sells it, man.
yeah, yeah, and the scream like just you feel the pain and just and like oh, it's real
Yeah,
painful. That's
yeah. You're
you
like,
feel
this
it. So
woman is crazy.
yeah. But anyway, so that's my number four. So let's very quickly before we get to the top three here. So number 12,
Oh,
and number 11, and number 10, number 9, number 8, number 7, number 6, number 5, and number 4. Okay, so
great.
that is our 12 to number 4. So now let us turn to our final three. So top three favorite Friday the 13th films. So Tanner, let us now turn to you. What is
Okay.
your top three, beginning with number 3? So
Right.
I tell
Number
you, wait,
three.
before you go, I think we're pretty much, I think our final three are the same films, right? So it's just a matter of what order they
Oh, no.
are.
Yeah, yeah. The same film. I
Okay.
wonder if we got it.
Okay. All right. Well,
I
let's
don't know.
let me see what your number 3 is here. So, what's your number 3 film?
Okay, so I've got A New Beginning, Part 5.
Okay.
So I think A New Beginning does so much right that it's pretty unbelievable. Even though, like, if you were going to list the good, bad, and the ugly, what's the ugly of this movie? That is not Jason. Everybody, initially when they watch the series are going to be up in arms, like, oh, this is not Jason. But what, without the end reveal, it's Jason, man. Like, you have so much going on. I think this encapsulates the feeling of the 80s by the music and by the hairstyles and the dancing and the kids. Uh, I think at sometimes it's really funny, and sometimes it's so mean spirited, and equally as funny, depending on what your sense of humor is. But you know, it's it's everything. So for me to rephrase, for when it comes to slasher movies, I really do. I think Friday the 13th stands above most. So when I want a slasher, and even when you're talking about Freddy, I don't consider all his films slasher films. I think it's a little bit
Hmm.
different.
Yeah.
And when if you want a full bodied slasher movie, this is like what you want to recommend people because the body count's high. Yeah, the characters are funny and you can differentiate them from uh, other characters in other slasher movies. I think it just does so much right. It's sleazy, it's cheesy, it's funny. Um, I know I'm just rambling at this point, but it. I wish people that write it off for not being a Jason movie would just reconsider it because it's so good.
It is. It is really good. It's
Yeah,
really good. I mean, I don't know. Like, am I gone again? Uh, there's a lot to be said about Roy. Yeah,
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
lot to be said about Roy. But you're right. It's not Jason. It's not Jason. So that could be, and that has been. I know for a lot of people, that's been that's a big deal, and I can understand that.
yeah.
Uh,
And so
but
much. I don't think there's been any other cinematic take on what happens when you put an axe to a chocolate bar. There's just that
Joey.
set
Yeah.
of actions just
Yeah.
corresponds to a nightmare after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the coincidence, he just happens to be the paramedic who comes and takes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So, but anyway, yeah, all these things happen. It's a perfect storm of mayhem and chaos. So anyway,
yep.
so that's your number three,
My
Friday the
number
13th,
three.
Part Five, a new beginning.
Yep.
With Corey Feldman also as a cameo appearance, by the way, at the
With Court,
beginning.
and I don't
Yeah.
know if you've seen, he's having a bit of a resurgence. Lately he's doing, I think he's trolling everybody on the planet right now. Have you been keeping up with your Corey Feldman news, Daisuke?
No, not no. To be perfectly honest, no. Kind of yes, but I mean I like his. There's a music. He was a singer at one point, so I
Uh-huh.
really like I forget the something about I forget the name of the song. It's like something resurgence where he wakes up. The video is waking up, and he walks around his like mansion, and he's
Uh-huh.
doing stuff. And like 2 minutes later, it's nighttime, and he goes back to bed. It's really I love that his music video.
Yeah.
But he's got some really good dance moves. I mean, it's reminding of some of the dance moves in Part Five, and I mean that very earnestly. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
not
I
a
know,
dancer,
yeah.
but I admire the dancing very much. I wish I could do the,
I
I
know
mean, I
the
wish I could,
yeah,
I could. I wish I could do it. I can't do it as well. But no,
yeah.
really, I mean
I
that. I
know.
think it's really great. Um, but anyway, so I haven't caught up with my Corey Feldman news. Is there anything I should be aware of?
No, I think he's just well. I think they're touring with they're the opening act for Limp Bizkit, and
Oh, cool.
I think a lot of people are watching him live. So I can't,
Cool.
as a person that's as a somewhat musician, I think he's living the high life, man. I think he's
Good
having
for him.
his zeitgeist moment right now.
Great, great. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah,
But he was also right, young Tommy,
long time.
and Mao from the Goonies, of course. But
Oh yeah, and
yeah,
Stand by Me. You can't
that's
forget Stand
right.
by
That's
Me,
right.
man.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
So let me get to my second favorite, and it's probably pretty fitting because it's Friday the 13th Part Two. Um, I think this is if we're going to use a Beatles, uh, this now they know how many holes it takes to fill the Albert Hall, right? They finally got
Yeah, a day in the
they
life.
fi- yeah, they finally got exactly what they set out to do. Even though they don't have the hockey mask yet, you have this iconic baghead Jason, almost Town That Dreaded Sundown, which I love that they did
Yeah,
in the remake too. I got to give them props because I really like the look of Jason in the remake as well.
me
But
too. Me too.
you really latch on to Ginny as a main character, and I think this is the first time that, or maybe one of the only times in the series that there's a whole another group of counselors that kind of live beyond the night too. There's some people that get stuck in a bar. Whoever was riding in that truck, I think is pretty remarkable. There's a chase scene, debatable. I think Friday the original has that the fight scene at the end might be better than the chase scene in part two, but man, the chase scene in part two when they're running through the woods, I remember the first time watching that too, man, and just being
Yeah,
scared out of my wits.
yeah.
Um, yeah, because you are taken away from the POV of the killer for the most part, and you really get to see Jason doing the kills. Um, and the kills, they're surprising. They're things that you really haven't seen before. Um, and the gore is just fantastic. I know there's some parts that were cut as well, but you go for a slasher movie, some of them you're waiting 45 minutes before something happens, and this one it's 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 like a greatest hits already. Um, it's wonderful.
This could go down as could be it could be for many people the greatest American slasher film that has ever been
Yep.
made. I mean, it quite possibly, and it's
Debatable,
that
yeah.
important. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
sure, it's. I mean, if you talk about the film and what it takes from, say, earlier horror films from like Mario Bava, for example,
Yep.
right? Twitch of the Death Nerve, etc. Okay,
Yep.
of course, we have that conversation, um, but still, right? This could be one of, if not, it could be the greatest American slasher film that has ever been made, for the reasons
Absolutely.
that I think
Like,
you mentioned. Yeah,
yeah. And it will spoil you too, because if you watch the Friday movies before kind of like getting your feet wet in the subgenre, you were going to be
that's right.
spoiled because it's just they're that good.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And and if we're going to get to my very last one, arguably the
I know
one-two
what it is.
punch. Yeah, the one-two punch. Like, really, on if I would have woke up in a different mood, part two would have been my favorite.
Yeah.
Um, but today, it's Crispin Glover.
Yep.
He put it in his computer, and it was meant to be. You know,
Yep.
it's arguably you could say it too. It could be the greatest American slasher that's ever made. So much happens. It's very quick paced. You know,
Yep.
there. I think there's a trick that they use that I like, that I kind of feel like. So in the Friday the 13th remake, I think they spend too much time giving you backstory about characters that they're going to get killed, when you could just
Yes.
have a girl on the side of the road eating a banana.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
you don't need to know where she's going. You don't
That's
need
right.
to know where she got that headband. You don't need to know why she needs that ride. You
That's
know,
right.
you just know what's going to happen. You
And
know.
I love how they interviewed the actor for the documentary. You
Uh-huh.
know, I love that. I love that so great. That here's my scene. I was on the side of the road. I love that. That's
Yeah.
brilliant. Absolutely
Yeah.
brilliant. But that could
Yeah.
be that. I don't know about you. Well, let me. I'm sorry. I don't want to. I'll save it for a little bit later. But you're right.
No, it's okay.
The woman on the side of the road eating a banana. That's
Yeah,
all
and
you
it's
need to know. Oh,
and as a secondary character, I don't know, and this, I don't know if you'll remember this one. In the original Friday the 13th, I think Mr. Christie goes to like a diner, and there's this waitress that kind of looks like Miss Garrett from the Facts of Life,
yeah,
and
yeah,
she
yeah,
really loves Mr. Christie. I don't know. I just want a movie with Mr. Christie and the lady from the diner, because I felt something, man.
Mr. Chris. Oh, hi. What are
Yeah,
you doing out here? I
yeah,
love that. That's great. But
yeah,
wonderful raincoat, by the way, he's got. It's great. But
yeah.
oh, that's so. This is your 3, 2, 1. So
Three,
Friday the
two, one.
13th. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Please. Anything more you want to say about your number one choice? I mean, you've picked this for number one for a reason, obviously. So please go ahead. I interrupted. I apologize.
No, 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 man. We're having a discussion. That's why I just think, um, especially around the time, like, there's so many characters that you can relate to in this. At some point, you relate to being a kid with Tommy, and you got some very attractive people renting out the house next door, and you're seeing them through the window, and you've never seen anything like that before. So you kind of live vicariously through Tommy, and you kind of remember how it was to be a kid, and or you kind of live vicariously through the teenagers. Whether you were the person that got the chick, or maybe you weren't so successful, and then you were just weird calling everybody teddy bear, and
Yeah, yeah. Watching the movie, right?
being a
Yeah,
total creep. And but
yeah.
I will say,
Yeah.
I didn't realize how absolutely horny this movie is, but
Yes, that's right.
it's off the charts,
That's
off the
right.
charts.
That's right. I mean,
And
in
not to
terms of the
mention,
right, in terms of the horny level of the films, this is probably up there. I mean, it's this or part five, or
yeah,
although there's some right, there's some pretty intense things happening in the other films, obviously. But yeah, I can see what
yeah,
you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
and then the dog. What happens to the dog and
I
the
know, yeah,
twins and
yep,
the skinny dipping and the boat thing, which is a
yeah,
big deal in terms of the special effects. To show the right. There's to show
yeah,
the thing that's going through there.
yep.
Um, and then what about the way that they dispatch Jason at the end there? How do you feel about that?
I think it's for a movie of the budget, for a movie of the time. I think it's pretty because up until that point, you're like, all right, he got an axe to the head, right? He got an
That's
axe
right.
right here, but
That's right.
to put the axe in or to put the machete like his head's a tomato and have him slide down to pretty pretty great in my book.
And then I forget to the guy at the beginning, right? The who was in he was in the Police Academy movies,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
right? Yeah. So I feel bad for him. Because I like his character in the Police Academy. I always felt bad for what happened in the beginning, and with the whole thing about like the sexy aerobics on TV or something like that.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Uh,
then
wow.
to go back to the sleaze and and
Yeah.
the horniness.
Wow. And right the kind of the brothers. Oh, he's killing me. Yeah, it's
I know.
great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so
Uh,
many. There's so many. You can out of every scene you could pick something, and it's arguably the best part of the movie. It really is.
that's right.
And the handstand from groin, the machete kill from groin to
Oh
sternum.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you know.
Yeah. And even things too, like when we've got Crispin Glover up there, like, oh, like this, and
Yeah,
Jason pushes his body. And, oh, it's
yeah,
so. Oh,
and you
yeah.
feel it.
You feel it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then of course, what's his name? Corey Feldman. You mentioned, but he's quick witted. He knows what to do in terms of making him look
yeah,
young boy. Like Jason does that thing just enough, giving enough time for the final. Yeah, just yeah.
yeah,
And then of course the reveal at the end, what could have been in terms of right. This is the real soul swapping thing that's going on in Jason Goes to Hell the Final Friday. This could have been what we could have seen in terms of
yeah,
the soul of Jason being entered into Tommy's
yeah,
body in here in
yeah.
part five. But oh well, oh well. I
He
mean,
set it up twice and they never do
that's right.
it.
That's right. You set it up twice. In fact, yeah. So, but oh well. Oh well. But anyway, that's a great 3, 2, 1.
Thank you,
I
thank
agree.
you, thank
My again, we have the same films as 3, 2, 1. It's just a matter of what order they're going to be in. So here we
you.
go.
Yeah.
My number three. Here's go. My number three is this one. Here we go. My number three. That's my number three.
Oh,
Now
okay.
I have this as I mentioned. This could be one of the contenders for the greatest American slasher film that's ever been made. So
Yeah,
I have nothing but 100% respect for this film. I think this is
yeah,
so important. It is it's some parts rebuilding the mythology. Jason's out there, which I think they
yeah.
really used so well in part four. They used the footage here in part
Oh,
two
it's
so
so
well
great.
as the
Yeah,
yeah yeah in part four as a recap so well.
yeah,
But part two, a lot of the stuff. This is the stuff of legend, even in terms of there's some of the shady things that are happening in terms of the right some of the scenes that were cut, which I think this Shout Factory, Scream Factory set does a really good effort in trying to show us what could have been.
yeah,
It's not quite there yet, but it for what it could, what they, for what is available, I think it does a really good job in showing us that. But in that sense,
yeah,
it's very legendary. The way it does the introduction of the Jason character in a way that we know. Not quite in the part three way with the hockey mask, but it's really quite frightening with the hole in the sack there, which is itself
yeah,
its own iconic look.
yeah.
Um, and then the way that they use the mother character and the sweater, which is really gross, by the way. You
Yeah.
can understand
Yeah,
how
she
Amy
puts
Steele
it
feels,
on.
which yeah, she's like, oh, I don't want to wear this icky sweater, but she has to do it in order to find her, and that's very smart too. It's her and it's Tommy in part four really thinking about how they can outwit Jason at the last minute. It's very clever, and the kind of the shriveled up like like rotten tomato kind of looking Mrs. Voorhees head there.
Yeah.
Really amazing how he's got the sweater. He was able to get the sweater
Yeah.
and the head. I don't know. Yeah, but anyway, in any event, I'm sure there could have been other clothes that she wore. Maybe she had the same sweater. Maybe Mrs. Voorhees had the same sweater. You know how
She
some
was like
people are
Steve
like that. Yeah,
Jobs.
she likes. Yeah, you like a piece of clothes. You buy like two or three of the same thing because you really like it. Maybe she was like that. Maybe she
Yeah.
had the same sweater.
Yeah.
But in any event, this is classic stuff. It's so classic at how it rips off Mario Bava. It's so classic how it sets up the whole Friday the 13th series. It sets up the
Hmm.
Jason character. The sequences are fantastic, especially the climactic sequence.
Yeah.
No one is spared unless you think about the characters that do get away, which is itself
Yeah.
very surprising. But the characters that do stay behind, it's no holds barred. Anything is on the table.
Yeah.
The poor guy, right, in the wheelchair. That always,
I
it's
know.
just, gosh, you just
I know,
don't,
man.
and like the shot of him going down the steps in the rain with the thing in his face. I think it's
Yeah.
repeated. You get a shot, you get a close up of the same shot. It's like he can't
Yeah.
get a break. It's just,
No.
it is just relentless. But that's an example. That's a very famous scene. And that's an example of how famous this is. A very important film in the Friday the 13th series, and also in the context of American horror films, and also the slasher film genre.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's a part two film, so it has that sequel edge to it, which is also very important in the American slasher history. So that's
Yeah.
my number three favorite film. So
Okay.
I acknowledge it as being an iconic slasher film, but again, this is my favorites list. So I have two films that I go to in terms of my absolute favorites. Now I had a hard time
I
deciding
know.
which would be number one. So you know what I'm talking about, the films. So
Yeah.
it's you're saying the 1-2 punch. So what is it going to be? So, but here's my number two, and then you will guess what my number one is. So here's my number two. Okay. My
Oh
number two.
man.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay,
Okay.
so my number two.
I
Yes,
had a
yes.
feeling. I
My
had a
number two
feeling.
favorite.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had a hard time. It's
Yeah.
so close. It's so close. This is in many ways. I mentioned part two being one of the most important, perhaps, maybe, possibly the greatest slasher film, American slasher film that's ever been made. This could be the greatest Friday the 13th film that has ever been made. This is
Yeah.
in many ways a perfect Friday the 13th film. It is
Yeah.
perfect. It's perfect. It sets up so much and yet it doesn't explain things. And I think the best example of that is, as you mentioned, the woman on the side of the road eating a banana. That is maybe, for all that it's set up, and how it just comes out of nowhere. It's like I mean, we'll mention it in part five. I'll mention it. There's a similar type of character in part five,
Yeah.
but the woman on the side of the road eating, but that explains it. I mean, it's got Crispin. I mean, of course, you always imagine what would a dance off been between Crispin Glover and Violet from part five. Like, who would have won the dance? It's like the Olympics and the break
Yeah.
dancing. Like, who would have
Yeah.
gotten the
Yeah.
gold medal? It's tough. I don't know. I really have no idea. But in any event, this is the woman on the side of the road eating a banana. It sets up so much, and yet you think, what is going on here? And just it's great. That's the great thing about Friday the 13th and the final chapter. It's random. The randomness is it's out of this world, and yet it does set up the whole thing about the kids next door. It's not quite campers, but it's got the woods vibe to it, which is really
Yeah.
nice. So it has that feel to it, and the environment and the nighttime setting. It's scary in a lot of places,
Yeah.
and of course the way that they off Jason. Although I must say that this is a very, as I say, I would have probably gone with let's burn up Jason in the atmosphere if you
Yeah.
wanna like get rid of him in a different, or like even not even let's put him in a hamburger thing and turn him into hamburger. Just like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
really make the point that he's gone. He's gone.
Yeah.
There's no more coming. But you know, He's got the machete to the head. He's got the sliced hand. He's got all this,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
this icky stuff going on. And of course, you got the final die, die, and
Yep.
then the great slow motion, Tommy,
Yeah.
Tommy just going absolutely out of control.
Yeah.
But this is in many ways the perfect Friday the 13th film, and it's set up with the great intro or the
Yeah. So
pre-titles, and
good.
it's yeah, it's so great. It's
Yeah.
great, and it's sleazy, it's scary, it's funny, it's creative, it's just over the top
Hmm.
Friday the 13th goodness. So, but it's my number two, which means, right? I have to say, I have a soft spot for Roy. What can I say? I
Hey.
feel bad, like when I eat chocolate, I feel like, I eat chocolate the same way that Joe eats chocolate. I'll have the thing here, and right, you just want to share the goodness, and
Yeah.
right, it's this is my favorite Friday the
Yeah.
13th film. Friday the 13th Part Five: A New Beginning. This is where I understood, and I saw this fairly early in my life.
Really?
Yeah, in VHS rental, much like the other old school hardcore Friday the 13th films, one, two, three, four, five. I
Yeah.
consider those to be like the holy grail of Friday
Yeah.
the 13th films. Those will be. I mean, there's a reason why they kind of occupy my top five spots, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But and as do you as well, right? The first five
Yep.
films are up there in terms of the five spots, but I think we feel similarly about this, which is
Yep.
these films are the core. But this is the oddball out of the five, right? This
It
is the
is.
one that is just it's 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 bonkers, totally bonkers. It is what's going. There's no, of course, there's no Jason, which is probably one of the most controversial things about it.
Yeah.
It's Roy. Like, who's Roy? Who's Roy? But I appreciate how they introduce Roy early on, so you can
Yeah.
understand who Roy is when he gets the final reveal. Although I must say that when you do see the reveal of his face at the end there, after he's fallen through and he's been impaled on the thing at the end there in the barn, and you see the mask. I don't quite know who he is. I always forget. Oh, who's that guy? He looks. I don't know who he is. But then you
I
realize, oh, it's Roy. You
I
know.
thought it was the dude that runs the camp. I think it looks more like the guy that
Yeah,
runs the camp than it does
that's
Roy,
right.
though. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, they looked similar, so it's a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah, the surprise wasn't quite there, but it wasn't it's not the surprise of, oh my gosh, it's Roy, but it's like, what the heck's going on? Who is this? What's going? What am I just seeing here? And just it's just chaotic, absolutely. And so you think about a film where you're not quite sure what's going on. This is the film where you think you don't know what the heck is going on, which I love.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. You think it should be going in one direction, but it totally
Yeah.
messes with you. While it's still a a bloody slasher film, but I say bloody, but there's a lot that's off screen. You see the after effects, you see like the what happens to Joy, but you don't actually see the join. It's kind of off screen. A lot of the stuff that happens, it is off screen, although there are some violent, intense bits to it.
Yeah.
There's a sleaze, there's a sex to it. Like there's the guy, the kind of the guy in the tank top, like clothes. He's kind of he just comes in for the help, and he just gets killed off after he sees the two kids in the woods having sex. You kind of see him like licking his lips, that kind of pervert type of thing, and he just
Yeah.
gets killed. So
Yeah.
he's sort of the woman on the side of the road eating the banana of
Yeah.
part five, which is. And then you've got the neighbors and Junior and another beheading scene and the tomatoes
Yeah.
and then
That's
the
amazing.
enchiladas and
Yeah.
ooh
Yeah.
baby ooh, and then the flare in the mouth and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of creative ways that characters are off, but I love how it is so uh, unexpected and so bonkers
Yeah.
that this is my favorite Friday the 13th film. This is my favorite. This Friday the 13th Final Step could be the perfect Friday the 13th film,
Uh-huh.
but this is my favorite Friday the 13th film. I'll say
And
put it
I
again. This is the greatest slasher film. This is
uh-huh.
the perfect Friday the 13th film, and this could be my favorite Friday the 13th film. So
And that just goes it speaks about the longevity of the whole series, man. You know, because like even though A New Beginnings you're number one, you're not wrong. It's you're not wrong. It's so good. Ethel. Have you ever met people like that in real life? I've actually met a couple people that were kind of like that. It's insane.
But you kind of understand, right, her
Ye-
feelings, because it's like,
Absolutely.
yeah, she just wants to have peace and quiet and have all these,
Yeah.
like if I were a neighbor and I saw like the house next door, whatever it is, people, what, like having sex on my lawn, I'd be like, yeah, I'd complain too. You know what I mean? So just like
Yeah.
yeah, I understand the birds and the bees, and I understand people want to have those feelings, but just gosh, find a room,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but, not to mention, of course, the whole thing with Reggie and Tommy and
Hmm.
I can't do the screaming,
Oh yeah.
and of course, I mentioned it. I guess I spoiled it at the top when I referenced part five and the enchiladas.
Oh
But
no. No. No.
yeah,
No. Not that's spoiled. None at all. Not at all.
but yeah, this is my think. Yeah, I had this this is yeah, one of my favorite horror films ever. And I don't think I've ever. How did you feel when you first? Were you disappointed when you saw this for the first time and it wasn't Jason?
I think I was, but then you kind of get like I think the rewatch value just kind of overtakes that. Like, because if you're like, oh, I'm in the mood for a Friday the 13th movie. You're like, all right, all right, let me put in part five, and then you keep on doing that. That should tell you something, you know. You're like, but there's something about this movie that makes me keep on wanting to rewatch it. It's just funny and hilarious, and the kills are great, and it's got so much style. Like, especially somebody because I craved kind of like 80s culture because I think pretty much 90s by the time I got around to it. And I think it really like it was the perfect point where you could still get an 80s movie and then still have gore with it before they got too censored by the
Mm,
MPAA. So it was a nice like it was a nice perfect storm.
yeah, that's an interesting. But this is a great '80s film.
It's
You're
amazing.
absolutely
Yeah.
right. Yeah, this is uh, and the yeah, I understand if people get disappointed when they watch this film. Even now, if the point of not liking this film is the fact that there's no Jason. It's for the most part. I mean, there's
Yeah.
the stuff in the beginning, and Jason is kind of in it at the very end. You could argue, but I
Yeah.
understand. Roy, but
Yeah.
um, I have always loved that part of this film. I don't think I was ever disappointed when I first
Yeah.
saw this film. It just felt like, oh, this is the thing, and
Yeah.
Tommy's going to become Jason, right? That's duh.
Yeah.
Which is then, of course, part six. When you watch it, tells a completely different story, as we know. But
Yeah.
this was, I think, it never disappointed me. It never disappointed me. Which, in that way, it I understand it's parallel for a film like, say, Halloween 3 in the
Yeah.
Halloween films, but it is also different in the sense that it is still within the universe of
Yeah.
films that has been set up in the first four films.
Yeah.
So where one can argue that the universe of part three in Halloween films is different from the films in the first two,
Yeah.
right, that were built up because I mean, I guess they see the film
On
on
TV. Yeah.
TV, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
in part three, I never felt disappointed when I saw this film. It was just par for the course, and
Yeah.
even now, I think it will always go in terms of a rewatch. If ever I feel like I'm going to rewatch the Friday the 13th films, this will always get a
Yeah.
lot of play for me. So
Yeah.
uh,
And that's a great. I never looked at it that way. That was great insight because Nightmare on Elm Street kind of does that with New Nightmare. It's really not quite attached like
Yeah.
Halloween 3, you know. So but that's a great point because it at no point does it feel like it's not a Friday the 13th movie or happening in that same uh uh happening in the same from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
great
that's
point.
interesting. Oh, thank you, thank you. No, not at all, not at all. Thank you so much. But
Yeah.
yeah. So my friend, we overlapped a lot
Yeah.
in terms of this. But I respect your list immensely.
Yours too.
Um
Yours too. Yeah.
I must let so maybe just before we leave, maybe some a few other questions about the Friday the 13th film. So maybe what are some of your favorite moments from Friday the 13th? Any film. What are your favorite like maybe we can think about uh, part of the films here is the killing scenes or the kill. So, what are some
Yeah.
of your favorite scenes in this regard? For instance, I mean, they're very violent. They're not for everyone, obviously, but for what
Yeah.
they are in the film and the special effects and the setup and the characters. So, what are some of your favorite highlights here in this regard in the Friday the 13th films?
Man, there's a I think the whole that in part 6, I think just the beginning is so good with the lightning and the way that when Jason gets up and he's got the bugs and he's got the 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 cobwebs and it's awesome that you can put in any movie and then really just vibe with the
Yeah.
way that Jason looks too. You know, um, of course the enchilada scene. Real, I'm telling you, A New Beginning has so many of those scenes. Like, just forget it, Vic. There's so many things that you just find yourself saying like just randomly, and it's you know, yeah. Anytime if I'm eating chocolate, I'm gonna think of like don't do laundry. Uh,
Or
and
don't offer chocolate to anyone with an axe. That's all. Okay.
or
Yeah.
with one of the like little studs right here, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course
What
and
about this?
just
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Another thing too. What is your favorite way that Jason gets killed?
mm, um
And I suppose that doesn't include part one. Let's include part one here too, in terms of the final the villain getting it their justice or how. What do you think is the best way that or the most creative way that's happened in the film? Because there's been a lot of ways that it's happened.
yeah. And I'll tell you at the time, like when the first one came out, I don't think you could do better than cutting her head off. Really. Like that was the last big crescendo at towards the end of the movie. I think it's really cool seeing Jason getting blown up and Jason Goes to Hell. You know, you kind of
Oh
start that
yeah.
off.
I
Yeah,
mean
it's
the
pretty cool.
beginning. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
beginning. Yeah, the beginning. Um, uh, I think in theory the toxic waste is pretty cool, but
Theory. In theory. Okay. Theory. Okay.
but,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you know, it's a bit of it's a bit of a stretch, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think have you heard that I can't remember. I think it's somewhere in Michigan. They have the Jason statue at the bottom of the lake. Have you ever heard that story?
No, I haven't
It's
heard.
pretty
That's really wow. Really? That's
so there's a something that mimics the end of part 6 where he's like he's got a chain and he's sitting and it's in a real lake. They have it in I think it's in Michigan, man, and it's pretty cool because people have gone down there with like scuba and taken pictures of it. It's like that's pretty incredible. So
wow.
every time that because I actually live near a lake, I'm like, man, I wish there was a statue of Jason at the bottom here, man. Yeah,
Wow.
little cool things like that. So I think that part 6 is pretty iconic for me. The end of part 6.
Yeah, that's a good choice. That's a good.
Yeah,
I can understand that. That's a really good choice.
and
And the
the
flames
sound
and
of
it's
Roy.
Tom. Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, please. Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm sorry. And the sound of when Roy hits the spikes, it's like somebody dropping 1,000 books. You know, it's like iconic.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good choice. I'm interested to know, however, that you didn't cite part four immediately. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know why. I think what messes me up a little bit. I know with Tommy, it was a uh very good move to kind of shave his head like Jason, but it's hard for the bald cap, man. As a bald man, I know when people are wearing a bald cap. I'm not just saying shave a child's head, but I think that it takes me sometimes it takes me out of the at the ending a little bit, even though I said
Wait,
it was my
yeah,
number one.
he does cut his hair very quickly. I don't think it's possible to cut all of your hair off in that way
Yeah, and she
in
when
like
she
2 minutes
grabs
in
him,
1 minute. Yeah, yeah,
she holds him by the back of the head so you don't see the bald cap wrinkles.
yeah.
That takes me out of the movie too a little bit.
Uh, so that's and then uh, what about let's see. You didn't. It's interesting how you mentioned part eight immediately.
Yeah,
Um, and then part six, which is I think I would probably maybe choose that one as well. I think that's probably the most that's probably the most iconic way for Jason to go. Although I do personally have a soft spot in my heart for Jason X.
and
What
I was
happens
about
to him
to
at the end?
say,
Yeah,
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 but I love the fact that that through any timeline that Jason goes, it always ends with him back at Crystal Lake. Like it's
that's
a
right.
looping, revolving door of interchangeable characters, but it always ends up with Jason back at Crystal Lake in the
That's right.
water. Yeah,
That's right. That's right. Or just he's just there, like
yeah,
Freddy versus Jason,
yeah. Or you got a
or
spaceman just riding them through the atmosphere.
yeah, it's amazing, really, really amazing.
Yeah,
So, but yeah, but I'm with you. Maybe I would probably cite Jason Lives as well in terms
yeah.
of the final climactic way they take care of Jason at the end there. Although I do understand to the part one.
Oh yeah,
This is very important indeed. I always felt that part two it was interesting, but it was very dark. I always found it difficult to see how they offed him. When she does the
yeah,
thing at the very end there, I always find what's going. Oh, there's because it's hard to see sometimes
yeah,
what happens, but I you can understand the aftermath there. And then part three, he's kind of like that, and like that, and he
yeah,
falls over. So I always thought if he gets an axe in part three, like the machete seems like he's got an axe in his part three. So I always thought that's why maybe for part four I probably wouldn't mention that as being the scene for me too because I've seen
yeah,
part three, so it
yeah,
doesn't seem like that far. Although I can appreciate the spectacular nature of the Tom Savini effect there at the end there, of course.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah. So, and then, are there any other moments that you want to cite in terms of Friday the 13th? Anything at all? Anything like any MVP moments or any any detail or quirk or fun part of the Friday the 13th films that you want to note? Maybe even beyond. You don't have to confine yourself to the films. I know
Yeah.
you've mentioned also other Friday the 13th films. You mentioned the video game a little bit earlier. I know you've
Oh yeah.
talked about some other films. Is there anything else you want to mention about Friday the 13th in terms of the series, the franchise, the fan films,
Yeah.
documentaries, anything at all?
Oh, speaking, I think it's very, very interesting that we live in a day and time where you can get these studio produced movies and sequels. And so I did brush up on was it Never Hike Alone and then Never Hike in the Snow on YouTube. They've got them combined. And there's another one. There's Never Hike Alone Part Two, but you got these people that are a fan of the franchise. They just go and they just made a sequel to Part Six. It's pretty incredible that people can just go and get the actors too. Um, I think it makes anybody's imagination unlimited now. And even the iPhone cameras, man, are so good that you can do anything. and it makes me thirsty for more Friday the 13th movies, because especially going through this whole set, you're like, okay, this movie came out like 1 year after, and you got, when you're watching them, in a rhythm of it, and then it just stops, and what's next? I need another one. I need to keep this franchise alive. I feel that about all the big ones now. We kind of got the resurgence from Michael Myers, which was nice, but I think Freddie and Jason are due for some new ones.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot that still could be done.
Yeah,
Um, right. You mentioned the fan films.
yeah,
There's also right. Will there be a TV series one of these days? Right. It's happening and it's not happening, or something's
yeah,
it's getting greenlit or it's getting canceled. I'm not sure. Will there be another movie? I don't know. Is there kind of issues in terms of contracts or IP? I'm not sure, but
yeah,
there's always room for a new friend. I mean, I mentioned my feelings about, say, the remake, but I still enjoy aspects of the remake very much. So
yeah,
I could see it going that way, or maybe a completely different direction, or maybe they might do something like what they did with with Bates Motel.
yeah,
Maybe have the same characters but be played by different actors, and maybe have a separate similar or new storyline as a kind of prequel,
yeah,
and maybe have that be a series. I'm not sure that's possible. I'm not
yeah,
but I'm not sure. They could just do just a regular old Friday the 13th movie like they did back in the
yeah,
80s, which
yeah.
I'm also very, I would be very enthusiastic for.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about like what they could do next? Like, would you like? I would love to know if you had any like ideas. I know that's kind of like a huge question, because um, but is there anything that you would like to see from the franchise?
Well, it's just having I mean, maybe just a film that doesn't have to go too much into the backstory.
Okay.
Just go for it and just set it up, or just have Jason do his thing, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what you mentioned about the remake. Maybe there was a little bit too much expedition or backstory.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't need that. You could just go straight for the jugular, in a manner of speaking, which I think
Yeah.
the earlier films did so well.
Yeah.
And that's another, I think, notch, a point for part two. It just, I mean, it does it so well. It almost throws out the story from part one
Yeah.
and just does its own thing. And it doesn't even it kind of sets it up, but just goes straight forward, which I think it really is admirable how they handle that story. So I could see a similar type of successful new film operating in a similar vein. I think maybe like it would be nice to get a Shell like from part three. It would be nice to get a Shelley character survive one of these films one of these days, or,
Yeah.
or a woman with a banana survive one of these films one of these
Yeah.
days.
She ends up being just like, or Miss Garrett that works at the diner.
Yeah, or the mom in part four, or the
Yeah.
dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. What happens? I guess the assumption is the dog doesn't quite make it in part four,
Yeah.
or one of the break dancers or someone. I'd love to see
Yeah.
some mix up there,
Yeah.
sort of defying expectations of the genre. That would be interesting. Or maybe do something with the Tommy storyline, but it doesn't have to be Tommy. It could be a new character, somewhere maybe like a
Yeah.
Tommy or Reggie or something.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Reggie. Yeah.
and just trying to set up something, or yeah, it there's a lot of room. It could go in different places. It could do a lot of things. Maybe Jason could go to space again. I wouldn't mind that as well, just to see
Yeah.
what they can do. Maybe his he's in the atmosphere, but that means he's in the air, so people breathe in Jason air and they become
Oh,
possessed.
like the or the Alien Covenant kind of
Oh wow, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, and
wars. Yeah.
that's right. And they turn into possessed Jasons or something like that, and
Yeah.
then and then they have to maybe they have to merge into some like final like Jason. They have to go
Oh
to
yeah,
New York and merge in some toxic waste thing, and they become like one Jason guy.
yeah, yeah.
And then they they're still like melting and stuff, but they find the hockey mask and they put it on it, and it melts around the hockey mask like Jason Goes to Hell the final Friday.
Or you could have like you could have multiverse where it's like played by different actors, like
Oh wow, yeah, yeah.
the late great who is it, Victor Wong, and Jason. All he does is say graboids.
Well, you could. That would be great. That would be great.
Yeah,
So
you know.
multiverse, Jason. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and be like right Spider Man or something. No Way Home, right? Or was that
yeah,
the one where? Yeah. So then they have
yeah,
you can have all the Jasons come and try to battle it out,
yeah,
and it could be and then Roy add Roy in there. Be like, why am I
yeah,
here? What's why am I
yeah,
here? Why was I invited? I don't even know why I was that kind of thing. That would be great.
yeah.
Uh, and
And
yeah,
Roy's played who's that? Who's it? Is it Femke Jemison? Who's plays from Goldeneye? And he just
oh
squeezes
yeah,
people with his legs.
Xenia on a top. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And he just squeezes people with his legs, man. Kills them that way.
Roy, wow, that's an interesting crossover. I never
I know.
imagined. Yeah, Roy with his killer thighs attacking people. That would be wow. I've never thought about that. You're like,
Yeah.
what is it? Was it cauliflower? What did you
It,
say?
it writes itself. Cauliflower
Cauliflower
rice, yeah.
rice. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Cauliflower rice and Roy with killer thighs. So played by them Jensen. That would be really interesting.
Yeah.
I would see that coming. Like who's the killer? Oh,
Yeah.
it's Xenia Onatop. She was the killer all along. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's
Invincible.
a yeah. Oh, that's the other guy. Yeah, yeah. What's
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
on here? My brain is going on overload with all the stimulus. It's wonderful. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
invincible, and then Jason's like, wow, It's
Yeah. I got some
like
web
how yeah.
legs.
Yeah, or he gets frozen like that lady in
Oh
Jason
yeah.
X there.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just smashes. He takes Boris's bunch of smashing, just breaks into
Yeah.
1,000 pieces or something. That would be interesting.
I think we
That
got it,
would be
man.
yeah. It's like and he has the pen that's a grenade. You go, oh, this could have been used by Stephen King. Ah, bah,
Oh yeah, dude, it's writing itself.
yeah, yeah. So that yeah, I can see that happening. That would be great. And then yeah, we'll have to So James Bond and right, Jason Lives as we mentioned has its own James Bond type of opening
Yeah.
titles intro. So
Yeah.
oh, fantastic. So Tanner, are there any last words you want to say in terms of Friday the 13th? Your feelings about the films, revisiting them, talking about them now. I mean, anything you want to say before we call it a day here. It's been a lot of fun, but the floor is yours, my friend, in terms of Friday the 13th.
No, I think I want to say most of them are on HBO Max, but I can't recommend this box set enough. They go on sale all the time. Like if you're a horror fan, like please. I know they'll probably do. I think the second movie's coming out on 4K, but I think the first four have the new scans. So I don't think you're going to be missing out on much. I don't know if that limited jump in definition is going to kind of there's so much fun to have in this box set. I thoroughly recommend it.
Yeah, the stream, this one, right? I got this. I jumped on this one at first. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Me
yeah,
too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah. I agree. I agree. And just to have them all there in this way. I mean, I had the one before. It was like the tin. It was in the tin with the glasses and the patch. I still have that
Yeah.
somewhere, but
But
I
that's
really
awesome. That's an
enjoyed it.
awesome set too. Yeah, that was a cool
Yeah,
set.
yeah, and it has the 3D glasses in there. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, this has been so much fun talking about these films, and I know that you're a fan of these films, which as am I, and I'm very happy that our lists are very similar in
I
this
know.
regard.
Yeah, we 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 tend to lean towards the same kind of style.
That's
So
right. That's right.
yeah. And do you mind if I do a shameless plug?
Go for it. Do as many as you'd like.
Okay. Well, and please forgive me, but I was also so Mr. Daisuke Beppu has a Patreon, and I am a Patreon member, and it's got some. He's started to do. I believe what are the films? Just so you got Doctor No, you got Suspiria. You're doing
Thank you.
the commentaries, and man, they're freaking cool. And I'm not just saying
Oh.
that because you're my buddy, man. But I think if just go check out the Daisuke Beppu Patreon, and check it out. I think there's a lot to be had and a lot of fun because it's like having special features. But if Criterion won't put Daisuke on special features, you can have them in your life.
That's you're very kind. I'm very flattered by that. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm not an expert when it comes to these. It's just like you, I enjoy watching them and then talking about them. So,
Yeah, and they're fun to listen
but
to. That's what I'm saying. Like as a fan, especially because I was watching your Argento reviews. Like I know they're from a couple years back too, and
yeah.
then I was finishing those, and then you dropped a Suspiria commentary. I was like, bro. So I even went out and got you were talking about this book in there, the Broken Mirrors, Broken Minds.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah,
right. That's right. Yeah, Udo. Udo says, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. He's as he's drinking his wine. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That's
yeah,
right. Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you so much, Tanner.
yeah,
That's very,
yeah,
very
man.
kind of you. Yeah, I mean, we were speaking a lot about Argento recently. What did you say about before we? What did you say about Argento film Four Flies in Grey Velvet and Part Seven? What was it?
Yeah, I can't. I'm having a hard time. I can't remember. So the main female antagonist, part seven, looks just like Mimsy Farmer. It was
Yeah,
driving me crazy. The one that
that's
gets the
right.
axe in the head. Yeah, I was like,
That's right.
I don't know whether it's just short blonde hair or something
Yeah,
like that. I was like, but it was blowing my mind, man. Uh,
yeah.
and you were mentioning that the main actress uh, that plays, I believe it's Whitney. Is it Whitney from the remake?
I think so.
Her
Yeah,
name, yeah, is similar or exactly to a character in Deep Red. I can't
that's
remember
right.
what her actual name is, though. Please forgive me.
Amanda Rigetti. Amanda
And
Rigetti. Yeah. So is the name of the character Deep Red in the farmhouse in
yeah,
like the middle of the film, and there's a scene involving hot water, scalding hot water in that film. So
and please,
yes.
please don't let me talk about Deep Red for 30 minutes. Uh,
Oh no, it's
but
okay.
great.
Deep Red's a great film. Deep Red. Maybe we should do an Argento. What we've done Nightmare on Elm Street, and
Hmm.
we've done Halloween, and then we've done Friday the 13th. I mean, we could do franchises as well, but I think
Yeah.
maybe we should do like a horror film director next with one of these. I don't know how you feel. Like I did my Argento film ranking some years back, but I think it's changed somewhat,
Do you
especially
think
with
so?
the
Okay.
with especially with and I have to figure out where the new film because I
Yeah.
did that before he made his film, which is called Dark Glasses.
Yeah.
So maybe we have to do maybe we could do that as far as our next ranking video or favorite
Oh man,
ranking video. What do you think?
I'd love
Or
it. I'd love
filmmaker?
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know we've kicked around Romero too.
Oh
Um,
yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
Well,
and then with the new Bruiser release
yeah.
from uh, why am I forgetting? I should
It's either his indicator or imprint.
That's right.
Indicator?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Indicator.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So,
Yeah.
that's right. So we could do that. So let's think about. Let's keep our options open. But
Yeah.
if you or yeah, but
I'm game and
uh,
willing for any discussion.
uh, my dear friend Tanner at the horrible show. So you continue to speak about movies and releases and going to the movie theater and so what are some of the videos that are upcoming or just uploaded or what do you want to talk about at your wonderful channel, the horrible show?
Well, man, I feel bad because it's been kind of a lull, but sometimes I got to hold all my family. They're musicians, so I think I would really like to do a tribute to Romero and Argento, like all the music. But I got to learn how to play the drums. So that's a big. I think that's the only thing that's keeping me back. but very soon I'd like to post something like that.
Oh wow! Wow. Could you give us any hints or any sneak preview as to what you might say about that?
Um,
That's really fun, fascinating.
so so all right, if you open up, so all the Romero and all the Argento, so you got anything from, you got your Flash of the Blade, Iron Maiden from Phenomena, which is great. Even if you want to do, if you like those heavy metal guys, you can do. I know Argento just produced Demons, but you got the Accept, you got in the movie theater
Wow,
scene, and yeah, you got a lot of cool. And man, you could just do a video about Goblin and Keith Emerson too. So
that's right.
just yeah, incredible, man. I love all those guys.
That's right. And then also, of
Yeah,
course, the great score for opera and
yeah,
gosh, and right. And there's also, of course, the Goblin music parts for both filmmakers when you're talking about the Dawn of the Dead and Romero, obviously.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, yeah. Oh, that sounds great. Oh, you should do that. I'd love to do. Yeah, please,
Yeah.
please, please, please.
Yeah.
We.
And
Oh,
John Harrison, I'd love to do. Man, I love the Day of the Dead
oh,
soundtrack.
me too. Yeah,
So so good, underrated. That's
yeah.
if you're going to get this box set and then get the John Harrison Day of the Dead soundtrack. You know,
That's great. Yeah,
oh,
that's
oh,
great.
great, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, boy, yeah.
yeah,
And then like the newspaper, blah. Yeah, I love that. It's also Creep
yeah,
Show too, right?
yeah, yep. Oh yeah, Creep
Yeah,
Show. Yeah. So
that's a great
I
score
think
too. Yeah.
options are limitless because I was messing around with some of the Keith Emerson Inferno stuff, and man, that's going to take me a little while.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's great. You know, more power, right? So superior and more bigger. Right. I love that. That's
Yeah,
great. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I was trying to find a way to like maybe I can just, you know, for the Beatles Get Back, they were able to like separate the tracks. I don't know. Did you hear anything about that? I'm sorry if I'm rambling.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, 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 yeah.
But
I
to make that the latest Beatles song, they were able to take John Lennon's voice out with the like separate it from his piano, and the AI is so cool with that stuff lately. So I was wondering if I could pluck the chorus singing from the Inferno soundtrack and then just do the music over that. But I guess we'll see, right?
ah the I love the Inferno soundtrack. I
So
think
good.
it's creepy. It's really creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, have you got the soundtrack itself, right? I had the CD
Yeah.
soundtrack. I don't want to say what it is, but there's a track on the CD soundtrack that kind of it's a
It ruins
spoiler.
it. Yeah,
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 you know what I'm talking about, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
actually have the album on my wall. I have it framed.
it's such and such character gets it. So
Yeah,
yeah, it implies that that character will die under that
yeah,
situation when, and the character does with that same music when you watch the film. So, but
yeah.
it's kind of like a similar thing that happened with the Star Wars Episode One, the Phantom Menace soundtrack,
Oh, I didn't know
which
that.
was
So they
released.
did it.
Yeah, it was released before the film, and then they have a track that says like such and such character like dies, or so like
Oh,
why would you do that? I don't know.
yeah, man.
But anyway, yeah, yeah, but it's okay. It's okay. I
Yeah,
think uh, my guess is people who are going to get the soundtrack will probably have seen the film already in terms of
yeah.
Inferno. But
Hopefully, hopefully.
yeah,
But
yeah.
when it comes to, I remember getting the soundtrack for Freddy vs. Jason before it came out because it had like a bunch of rock guys on it or whatever,
Oh
you
yeah.
know. Yeah, yeah. So,
Oh.
yeah, it's very interesting. So, note to musicians out there: don't spoil the movie soundtrack, please.
Or yeah, just maybe. I mean, you can release the music. Just yeah, just don't give it.
Yeah,
Such and such character dies.
yeah.
Kind of title. That's all. That's all we ask.
Do the
So.
goblin and say death die.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
death dies. Yeah,
death die.
death dies. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Or they should have had that as I don't know. Do they have that as kind of the Halloween Kills soundtrack? Death dies tonight or something like
yeah,
that, or Evil dies
yeah.
tonight or something.
Every
Yeah, that would.
every
Yeah,
track is
yeah,
called
yeah,
Evil
yeah.
Dies.
Evil dies. Evil dies a day after tomorrow. and
Yeah.
evil dies tomorrow. Yeah, that would be great. So it's okay if it's evil or death. If they
Yeah.
die, that's okay. You can say that as the track title, but not a character name. But anyway. Oh, Tanner. So yes, Tanner at the horrible show. And I'm looking forward to your thoughts. You're always so kind. You always follow up with me. We talk offline. You always ask me about, have you seen this film or that film? You're always so enthusiastic about classic films and also recent releases. Tanner, you have such a great outlook. One of my great heroes and one of my dearest friends. And whatever you say about films and releases and Blu-rays and DVDs and box sets or films that are released. You mentioned about like Alien Romulus the other day, which I haven't seen
Yeah.
yet, or the first Omen, which I saw on the airplane on the way back from Tokyo of all places.
Oh yeah.
And
So
so,
yeah.
oh yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
Oh, it was
this
okay.
was
Yeah, it was okay. It was. I mean, I kind of enjoyed it. I maybe we can talk after. I have a question about that film. I still
okay.
don't understand about one thing, but I'll ask you off when we finish it. But yeah, my point is that you have this great enthusiasm across the board,
Oh, thank
and
you,
so
man.
your opinion really matters to me. So I always think what does Tanner think about this, and I always go back to the great like that great video or a thing you did on YouTube and Instagram. Like, how many copies of The Beyond can you own?
And man, there's another
Uh,
one coming out. It's coming out in like October in 4K, so it's gonna be
oh
another
my
one.
God. Are you gonna get that or
Yeah,
do you have a 4K player?
I do, yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Okay.
it's not the best though.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. That's not
Yeah,
a
yeah,
problem.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's an old Panasonic one. It's like one of the first ones that came out.
Oh, it's cool. Very nice stuff. Very. Oh, but Tanner, this has been so much fun. But let's do this again. You're very gracious in coming on, and so please, my dear friends, show your support for Tanner. I'll leave all the information as I always do in the description box. So go to his channels, press the like buttons, comment, and follow up with Tanner. He's really just um, one of the nicest guys. One of the nicest guys. He had great taste in cinema. So, Tanner, let's do this again. Thank you so much, my dear friend. Thank you.
Dude, thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Always.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And, don't eat too many enchiladas.
No, 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 man. Not in this heat.
Thank you, my dear friend. Thank you. Cheers. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Cheers.